A little while back, I started an OnlyFans account. I know what you're all thinking, but hey, I was single at the time, and I figured it was a pretty harmless way to earn a little extra dough. I started off by posting some teen stuff, and progressively got into uploading more mature images. Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. I lived with my parents at the time, so I had to be careful about making my content. Like I said, I wasn't ashamed, but I knew they wouldn't be as open-minded about it. As such, I always waited until they were out of the house before I took any pictures or videos, and I didn't tell any of my friends how to fear that it would somehow get back to my folks. It was very private business. After just a few months, I couldn't believe how much money I was making on the site. I'd amassed a sizable following and monthly income, so I decided to treat myself. My wardrobe was pretty old at that point, and I decided to buy some new clothes. I hit up a local store to pick out some new outfits. Now, that might sound strange to some of you, but when I got to the store, I started live streaming to my OnlyFans followers, talking to them about changing up my style and asking for their opinions on certain items. I'd often stream to my supporters through my private, but fans-only YouTube channel during the day. I thought this built a sense of community. A lot of them enjoyed seeing me go about my life, whether I was just out shopping, at a cafe, or just vlogging from my apartment, and I'd reply to their comments and connect with them. For the most part, they were well-behaved and respectful during those streams, and I started recognizing a few of their names. It was pretty wholesome. I made my way through the store, holding the camera in selfie mode, engaging with my fans. After about 20 minutes or so, I ended the stream. At some point during that evening, I logged onto my page. That's when I noticed a message from one of my regulars. "Thanks for wasting our time and money by lying to all of us. You never told us you had a boyfriend. Consider this the end of my support." I was confused. Boyfriend? Where'd he get that idea? Well, this guy was one of my biggest supporters, and I was really sorry to see him go, so naturally, I sent him a message. Hey, I am single, free as a bird. I don't know who told you I wasn't. Do you think I'm stupid or something? I'll admit it took me a couple of months to notice, but it's obvious you're with some guy all the time. I see him in the background of all of your streams. He was with you at the store today. What are you talking about? The dude in the green shirt. I feel really sorry for the guy, to be honest, dating someone who does what you do. I went back to check the recording of that day's stream, and sure enough, about 5 minutes in, over my left shoulder, there was a guy in a green shirt, walking quite close behind me. He was very tall, had a muscular build, looked to be in his late 20s, but already had dark circles under his eyes and thinning hair. Okay, well, that didn't prove anything, just some guy behind me at the store. I continued watching the video, and yeah, the guy did seem to be behind me for most of it, popping up throughout as if he was following me, but surely that was just a coincidence. Still, my regular's message stayed in my mind. He said he'd seen this guy in multiple streams of mine. I went back and checked the previous stream that I'd done. It was of me at the mall. Nothing seemed out of place. Then, I saw him. That same guy, in that same green shirt, walking behind me in the distance. That stream had lasted 47 minutes, and you could see him behind me throughout it. Sometimes far, sometimes close, but always following me. The stream ended with me at a cafe, and the guy sitting down just a couple of tables away from me, all by his lonesome. The whole time, his dark eyes were watching me. I hadn't noticed him at all. Okay, so I started getting a little freaked out at this point. Obviously, this wasn't just a coincidence. I went back and checked more of my older streams. Videos of me in town, videos of me walking the dog at the park, and chilling on the beach. In all of them, he was there, and in almost all of them, he was wearing the same green shirt. This man, who I had never seen before in my life, had been following me on what appeared to be a daily basis. He wasn't a part of my life, but I was clearly a big part of his. I wasn't sure what to do at first. He had never approached me or nothing. My dad was in law enforcement, but I couldn't exactly go to him for advice. I decided to stop posting content on my account for a while, resolving to stay alert and keep an eye on this guy, and just to wait for everything to blow over. If things escalated, then I'd go and tell my pa. I figured this guy would get bored and leave me alone. Boy, how naive I was. A couple of weeks passed, and luckily I hadn't seen the green shirt guy around town. Guess my plan had worked. My fans were getting antsy about me not uploading new content, and my earnings were going down as a result. One weekend, my parents went off on a romantic getaway, and, hoping to ride the OnlyFans wave a little longer, I decided to take some new photos in my bedroom. Since I was home alone, there was no risk of being caught. That night, I cooked up some dinner in the kitchen, opened the window to air it out, and then went upstairs to snap the goods. After uploading the pictures, I started a live stream to apologize to my followers for my long absence. I told them it was back to business as usual. The salty dinner had made me thirsty, so during that live stream, I went downstairs to grab my water bottle in the living room, bringing my phone with me so I could continue interacting with my viewers. I was holding my phone out in front of me, completely oblivious to my surroundings, responding to my viewers' comments. I got to one, and as soon as I read it, my stomach dropped. "Hey Mellowcat, who's the man at your window?" In the video feed on my phone, in the corner of the screen, I noticed the small, blurry outline of a figure in the darkness behind me. I turned to see the man, the one who had been following me, standing outside, his gloved hands pressed up against the living room window, his face real close as he looked in at me, his dark eyes wide with excitement. I screamed and ran upstairs with my phone in my hand. I bounded into the bathroom and locked the door behind me as I called my parents. I cried to my dad that there was some guy outside our house, told him that he'd been following me for a long time. He said that they were on their way back right now, not to panic, and that my mum was already calling the cops. We didn't have any neighbors to call for help since we lived in such an isolated area, so he instructed me to run to the attic and to keep as quiet as possible until help arrived. I did as he suggested and unlocked the bathroom door. As I stepped out, I could hear quiet movements coming from the kitchen below. That's when I remembered I had left the window open. And this guy was inside my house. The access to the attic was in my parents' room, and I could already hear the guy softly calling out to me downstairs. "Hello, Mellowcat, where are you?" He was calling to me using my OnlyFans username. I sprinted into my parents' room and slammed the door behind me, and as I went to lock it, could hear the guy storming up my stairs. Luckily, locking the door gave me just enough time to pull down the attic's ladder and scamper up with the hook in my hand. As I climbed up, I could hear the man on the other side of the door thumping into it with all of his body weight. I pulled the ladder back up and closed the attic hatch behind me. I waited up there with my hand over my mouth as I heard the door give way. My heart was beating so fast I couldn't stop breathing heavily. Things were being thrown around and smashed in the room beneath me. All I could do was listen as the guy rampaged through my house, occasionally shouting obscenities and saying that he knew I was still in the house. This torment didn't last long, maybe only 5 minutes tops, but I felt like I was up in that attic for an eternity. The house fell silent, but I stayed up there until I heard the police sirens come rolling into our driveway. My parents weren't far behind them. During their investigation, the detectives dusted for fingerprints on the door handles. There weren't any, but there was something else. They found traces of trichloromethane, chloroform. It must have come off a rag or off his gloved hands. The only thing missing from our house was my laptop, which had a bunch of photos of me that I hadn't released online. This guy had clearly come for the real thing, but seeing how I clung to safety, he settled for images instead. I haven't posted anything online since, and didn't even log on to tell my followers goodbye, since I knew that he was among them. So, in the end, I came clean to my parents about what I'd been doing, and moved in with my sister in a different town for my own safety. I won't say where for obvious reasons, and Screenshot himself could be listening. Yeah, despite having relatively clear images of the guy's face, and knowing that he must have been from the local area and one of my followers, they never found the guy. I have no idea how he got my address. I'm just thankful I went downstairs when I did. and my viewer caught the shadowy figure outside my window. Had that guy come in while I was streaming upstairs, I might not have heard him, and who knows if I'd still be here to share this story. At the time, I was 21 years old and totally broke. I worked for a consultancy firm that wasn't a big player there or nothing. In fact, I was pretty much at the bottom of the company totem pole. I earned enough money to get by, but always had dreams of traveling to another country and studying abroad. If I was ever going to make that dream a reality, I needed another source of income. It was around that time that OnlyFans started blowing up. For the 2 people listening who don't know what that is, OnlyFans is a website where people, mostly women, share pictures and videos with paying subscribers. This is usually mature content. It's pretty controversial, with some people being all for the platform and others saying it's sleazy and gross. I'd heard a few stories about women making fat stacks from the comfort of their own homes, and even though I'm no Belle Delphine, I figured, yeah, what the hell, maybe I can earn a few extra bucks too. I made an account and recorded a little intro message for any prospective followers. Then I took my first raunchy pictures and uploaded them. I'd costed out my net. Now I just had to wait for a few fish to come swimming by. After a few weeks, I'd attracted a few followers, all of whom were subscribed at $10 a month. Some of them even gave me tips or paid me extra for exclusive content. I made a promise to myself that whatever money I earned through the site would go directly into my travel fund. And as soon as I had enough money to go globetrotting, I'd stop using the platform altogether. In the meantime, I had a lot of work to do at my real job. One afternoon, I was at a business conference, networking alongside my co-workers. Where I live, business cards are still a formality, even for low-level grunts like me, and I handed out dozens to prospective clients who seemed interested in working with our company. Honestly, I met so many new people that day, all of them in similar suits and with similar haircuts, that all of their faces and names seemed to blur together in my memory. I returned home, exhausted from the socializing. That evening before bed, I logged into my OnlyFans account to check how things were going. Great, I had a new subscriber. This new guy, who went by the unassuming username, John Smith, sent me a direct message as soon as he saw I was active. $10 a month. Netflix doesn't even charge that. It's worth it. You won't be disappointed. So far, I like what I'm seeing. You're very beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. He sent me a few more friendly messages, asking me pretty innocent questions, like if I had a dog. I didn't. If I was dating anyone. I wasn't. And if I lived with my parents. I lived with a roommate who was away that week. You know, you really are very beautiful, he messaged me. Thank you. I bet you get down more often than the blow-up doll, eh? Oh. Can I make a request? Like a picture request. It depends what it is and what you tip me. If I give you $5 right now, would you take a picture of yourself pouting into the camera? It would have been a long day, but even though I was tired, I wanted the money, so I quickly dolled myself up and took the picture for the guy. I sent the picture, which he could unlock for $5. He unlocked it and seemed pleased with what I'd sent. No more than a minute later, he sent me another request. How about one of your pretty feet now? I'll pay you another $5. Sure, whatever you want. I'll never get what's up with some guys and feet, but of course I took the picture for him and sent it, again behind a $5 paywall. He made a couple more requests, each time paying me $5. Easy money, I thought. One of me in high heels, one of me in such and such a position, etc. Then, he sent me another request, this time for $10. Add me on Instagram. He included his account name in the message. $10 just to add a guy on Instagram. Sure, why not? I hadn't updated my Insta for over a year and only had a couple of posts on there anyway. I took his $10 and added him. Strange, there weren't any posts on his account, but the circle around his blank profile picture was highlighted, meaning he had recently added to his Instagram story. Just out of curiosity, I clicked on it to see what he had posted. It was a video of my house, posted 2 hours ago, taken from the woods just outside. The next story played, uploaded 5 minutes ago. It was another video of my house, this time much closer, taken from the other side of the street. The video zoomed in on my bedroom window, the only room where the light was on, the room I was in. The third story, uploaded just 2 minutes ago, was taken from just outside my porch window. He was right outside my front door, filming the inside of my house through the glass. A message popped up in my DMs. Let me in. Terrified, I locked my bedroom door immediately and called the police, telling them that someone was outside my house. All the while, he continued DMing me. Come outside, or I'll have to come in. The door handle downstairs started rattling as I cowered in fear upstairs, waiting hopelessly for help to arrive, screaming out of my bedroom window for help. This wasn't the best neighborhood, let's put it like that, and my neighbors either couldn't hear me or didn't want to help. The guy's rattling on the door handle turned into banging, then slamming. Suddenly, everything downstairs fell silent. I thought he had gone. But after a few minutes, I could hear tapping on the downstairs windows. And shortly after that, the smashing of glass. I'd soon learn that he had used a rock to smash the living room window. Not 30 seconds later, I could hear sirens off in the distance. By the time an officer arrived to check that I was okay, the guy was long gone. I told the investigators everything. They patrolled the area to look for any suspicious-looking guys, found nobody, and suggested I stay somewhere else for a while. I asked them to hang around while I packed a bag. As I got in my car to drive to my parents' place, I checked my phone one last time. There was one unread message in my OnlyFans DM box. Pleasure doing business with you. I told my parents everything that had happened and tried my best to get some sleep. That night, I was plagued with questions. Who was John Smith? What was he planning on doing? How did he know where I lived? My private information was, of course, not available on OnlyFans. I was relatively new to town and didn't know many people in the area. The next day, I pieced 2 and 2 together. My business card. It didn't just have my company address on, but mine as well. The fact this happened the night after that networking event couldn't have been a coincidence. I'm convinced that the creep was one of the people I'd met that day. Using the information on the card, he must have found my account online and decided to pay me a visit. I passed that information along to the authorities, along with the dozens of business cards I collected that day. This, of course, resulted in nothing. There was no evidence to speak of, and the Insta account was obviously a throwaway. I realize now that he was asking me those friendly questions at the start to see if I lived alone and to check I didn't have a guard dog. Needless to say, I quit using the site. I've moved back in with my parents permanently now, but can't afford to give up my job at the consultancy firm. Now, whenever I go into work and meet with our clients, I put on a brave face. But inside, I'm always questioning whether the guy I'm working with is the same one who was outside my house that night. I hardly like to remember the first and last time I ever took an Uber, as it was a fairly traumatic experience. I had just finished an 11-hour shift and I hadn't hardly gotten any sleep the night before. Even if I had a vehicle at that time, I'm not sure I would have chosen to drive myself home, just because of my level of exhaustion. Usually I took a taxi home, but either the ones that drove past me that day didn't want to drive me, or they were all taken. So I chose to use Uber since my friends both raved so hard about it, practically preaching as if it was their own personal religion. Well, in every good few experiences there's a bad one, and this is where mine begins. Once my Uber arrived, I noticed it had no back license plate, and I didn't think much about it because, to be quite honest, I was a blink away from passing out onto the pavement. So of course, I didn't think anything of it. The moment I sat in the vehicle, I noticed how clean and impeccable everything was, especially compared to most of the taxis I'd taken in my life. Another thing I noticed was how the man in the front seat never so much as took a glance in my direction. He even just sat there for a minute in complete and utter silence, unmoving. After that minute, I began to think that I had somehow gotten into the wrong vehicle and apologized. But once I did, the car started moving, so I relaxed a bit, assuming he may have just been waiting for a moment to get back into traffic. The last thing I remembered was watching the bustling downtown area going about its business, until my eyes finally chose to flutter shut and send me into a blissful sleep. I wake up once the car hits a large pothole in the road, causing me to whack my head onto the window fairly hard. The first thing that alerted me to something being wrong was the fact that it was super dark out. When I entered the Uber, it was at least 3 p.m. It doesn't get dark this time of year till at least 4 or 5 at night. On top of that, the highway in which I didn't recognize was practically dead, which that in itself was of rarity. So I couldn't even begin to comprehend how long I'd actually been out for. As I glanced out the window, I felt my heart sink into the pit of my stomach slightly. We were no longer inside the city. Instead, we were on a pitch-black highway surrounded by dense forest, and I didn't live anywhere outside of the city. I quickly began to feel the tingling sensation of eyes on me, causing me to turn my head to the empty seat beside me. Except, it was no longer empty. It was nearly too dark to see, but I was able to make out the shape of a dark, lanky figure seated beside me. The only part of his face were lit up by the dim dash lights, or his insanely wide eyes staring at me intensely. The way he looked at me gave me a sense of complete and utter panic. I was in a situation that I never thought could happen to me. It was something that happened to other people, but never me. "Do you happen to know if we're close to my destination?" I questioned, trying to sound as calm as possible. Then the man beside me continued to stare at me longer than any sane person would be comfortable with. "He has other plans for you. A new destination. We're almost there," the man beside me stated in an unsettling tone. At this point, I was sure the man hadn't blinked a single time since I had woken up. The man's words quickly sent my already present panic into overdrive. The car was going nearly 100 miles per hour on the highway. In the middle of the night, my mind began to race as fast as the vehicle, grasping at any faint idea I could use to get me out of the car or out of the situation. If I jumped out of the vehicle and somehow didn't break any bones or end up dead, it wouldn't easily find me on the road. Plus, I had no clue where I even was. "I have to go to the bathroom. Could we maybe make a quick stop?" I said. The two men simply stayed quiet, practically ignoring my question. Although it hardly seemed as though they had even heard me at all. "The others will welcome you once he is done. He will welcome you." The man in the front seat finally spoke deeply, the vibrato and the intent in his voice shaking me to the core. That moment, a single vehicle finally drove past us. The light that filled the car was enough to help me see my surroundings better, giving me a moment to get a more clear look at the second passenger. The man beside me had fresh stitches all over his face. His top eyelids were stuck open, making his constant wide eyes more understandable, but no less unsettling. His entire face was almost like some sick sewing project, almost reminiscent of Frankenstein, but confined to the head rather than the entire body. "You came to us for a reason. You will be pleased to make you like me, like us," the man beside me said, beginning to stroke my hair and touch the features of my face. I began to shake under the stranger's touch as well as his words. His fingers were rough and disconcertingly dry. The sound of sirens from behind us let an overbearing rush of relief wash over me. But there was also an almost uncomfortable tension that fell upon the air. It felt as if something within the air was taut, ready to snap at any moment. As if the slightest provocation or wrong movement could cause it to blow. "Do you folks know why I pulled you over?" the police officer questioned once he reached the car. "No, sir, I don't believe I do," the man in the driver's seat said in a flat manner. "Well, for starters, you were going nearly 50 over the speed limit. That, of course, isn't a huge deal, as it is the highway, and it's not very busy right now. But both of your headlights are burnt out, and that's way too dangerous for the road. I'm surprised I hadn't caught you. It was so dark," the officer stated calmly, tapping his fingers against the car as he stared into the dark vehicle. The moment his eyes made contact with my own, I tried as hard as possible to convey my fear, to slightly plead for help without aggravating the two men in some way. "I thought I recognized you. There's a warrant out for your arrest. I'm afraid I'll have to take you in," the cop says sternly, singling me out. The men around me didn't seem to clue into the fact that he was talking to me, as I saw them both tense up at his words. The moment the police officer opened the passenger door beside me, I nearly began crying out in relief. I refrained. Men behind me stayed uncomfortably quiet as the cop locked the cuffs on me. The now overly acquainted sense of unease and panic continued to feel me. The men beside me stayed uncomfortably quiet as the cop locked the cuffs on me. The now overly acquainted sense of unease and panic continued to fill me as I felt the man's eyes bore into my back. It felt like at any moment my chance at freedom would be taken away, that they would be armed and shoot my savior, or even me. But they didn't either. Instead, they sat there within the car quietly, just staring at us in a horrific trance-like state. Even as the cop began to drive away, I somehow felt their cold and unnerving stares upon my skin. The air still thick with tension, and no matter how far away we got, their car never moved so much as an inch, which made my feeling even more so stressed than before. If that was even possible, how'd you know I needed help? I'm a cop. I can recognize the look in your eyes from a mile away. I see it daily, he stated. Within seconds, I began breaking down in tears. Every emotion suddenly overwhelmed me. The man didn't say another word the whole entire ride. He simply let me cry it out. He even offered to watch my house for the night in case they came back, as I'd given them my address. I, of course, said yes, even though I didn't sleep a wink that night. I never came back. The thought sickens and terrifies me. Maybe they never even left that spot on the highway. If that hellish car had never gotten pulled over, I don't even want to know what would have happened. I wouldn't have got my chance to escape that horrible situation I'd found myself in. Be careful if you take an Uber or any other service like it. No matter how tired you are, don't fall asleep in the vehicle. Uber nightmare. It was another night on the job. Not that I like nights on the job, but my rent was due in a week and I already spent the money I had on new tires and an oil change for my car. I knew that was no excuse for my landlord, who told me last month, if you're late on your rent again, I'll make sure you're gone. Yeah, she wasn't big on leniency. In any case, I've spent every night chauffeuring around kids, workaholics, and drunks for the abysmal wage Uber will give me. I couldn't be kicked out onto the streets. It's not like I have family around since I moved to this quiet coastal town a few months ago. I haven't really made any friends here either. So, into the night, I drove. I hated driving around at night. Gave me the creeps. Because it was close to the water, there was always this ominous dew that blanketed the sky. Imagine that drive down a foggy bridge. You know, the one where you didn't dare look back through the rearview mirror. Anyway, I just dropped off this inebriated couple from a bar. When my next picked up pinged my phone, I thought to myself, that was fast, but it was late. Probably just another person leaving the bars. Last call I'd surely passed. As I drove to pick up my next passenger, I noticed that this person is exactly where I picked up the couple a half hour early. At this time, it didn't strike me as too strange. It was more of just a weird coincidence. I shrugged it off rather quickly. As I approached, I didn't see anybody, and there seemed to be an extra layer of fog. I honked and looked to see if anybody was walking up, but I didn't see anything. I averted my eyes to my phone to double-check the pickup location. No, I was in the right. The rear driver door suddenly opens. My heart was definitely close to leaping out of my chest. Em, hello there. Scared the hell out of me. I laughed. I was even a little embarrassed. He was a heavyset guy who didn't say anything as he stepped in and sat. I looked back at him briefly. He was clutching a brown paper bag. He put it beside him, keeping it close. Then he looked at me with a blank stare. I turned back around quickly. It says you want to be dropped off just a block away. Was there a mistake? I mean, no problem. I just want to make sure it wasn't a mistake. Finally, the guy spoke. His voice was low and harsh. Must be a mistake. He paused. Was he going to say something else? Did I not hear something he said? I'm with the couple that you just picked up. Oh, really? I asked instinctively. They wanted to ride separately, he said, matter-of-factly. Then I remembered that the couple was making out, and they were surely drunk. So I guess it did make sense for them to ride alone. Still, it just seems so strange. So, I'm taking you to the same place I took them then? I asked. He just grunted. Oh. I felt like something was off, but I have to admit I was too freaked out to question anything. So I put their address in, put the car in gear, and drove off. Every so often, I glanced at the brown paper bag the guy had next to him. I didn't want to be obvious, but I wondered if there was maybe a beer in the bag, maybe some snacks. I even began to wonder if there was a weapon of some sort inside. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Then my phone sounded and I almost jumped. I had a notification from Uber that there was someone else that wanted to be picked up along the way. That was weird since it was already past 3 in the morning. It didn't bother me though. I was just relieved to have someone else join us. I started getting more and more on edge with this strange guy sitting behind me. We got to the location of the other passenger. She was standing under a street light. Easy to find this time. Already an upgrade from my last pickup. This girl was bundled up quite a bit, so it was hard to get a good look at her. She slowly jogged up to the passenger side of my car, which I'd usually advise the person to sit in the back. But given this guy back there, I decided to not put her in that situation. She opened the door and got in quickly. "Hello, late night, huh?" She looked at me and her eyes seemed ice cold. It was unnerving. She smiled and looked at her hand. I brushed it off and looked to see where she was being dropped off at. It was the same address the couple was dropped off at. The same address I was taking this guy. I looked at her and asked, "So, you all know each other?" She looked back at the guy and then smiled. She then looked at me and said confidently, "Yep." I swallowed the spit that had been welling up in my mouth and shut up for the rest of the drive. I was sure something was wrong, but there was nothing I could do at this point. My best bet was to just drop them off and go home. We were just minutes away, and then all this would be over. As we pulled up to the address, I noticed all the lights were off. Great. The guy got out first and began walking towards the house. Then the girl got out. Before she closed the door, she looked back and said, "You just have to wait a minute. We're dropping off something they forgot. We'll be right back." She smiled and waited to hear how I was going to respond. Yeah, of course. Now, why the hell did I say then? She shut the door and went to follow the guy. I looked on at them. It was so dark. I even lost sight of them. Then I looked ahead and sat there for a few minutes. Should I just leave? I thought to myself. Before I could even entertain the thought, the girl's hand slammed on the passenger window. She opened the door and exclaimed, "Please, hurry quick. My friend needs help." My jaw dropped. I knew something bad was happening. Something just didn't feel right. I sat there frozen. "Hurry, there's blood. We need your help to get her to the hospital," she continued. I tried to push the fear out of the back of my mind, got out of the car to follow her. I followed closely as we neared the front door. When we got just inside the door, I stopped and was going to make a run for it back to my car, but the door slammed before I could step out. The guy was standing there and shoved me to the ground. He had a blood-soaked knife in his hands. The girl slowly turned to me, told me to run, while laughing maniacally. Still, on the grounds, I crawled as fast as I could to the next room. It was the house's dining room. I couldn't believe my eyes. The couple I had driven home about an hour ago were sitting at the table. Both sat there dead, with multiple stab wounds. As I continued to crawl, my hands and knees became soaked with their blood. I tried to cry out, but my shock would not let me. The guy was behind me now, though I couldn't see the girl. I stood up and tried to see if I could make it to the staircase in the next room, audibly screaming at this point. I darted and could feel the guy dart after me. I glanced back and by a stroke of luck saw the guy slip on their blood. I ran even faster up the stairs. The girl's voice started laughing again, but this time from somewhere I couldn't see. One of the upstairs bedroom's door was open, so I jumped in and shoved myself in the closet. Hopeless, terrified, I cried into my hands, smearing blood across my hair and face. I was a dead man, and we all knew it. I couldn't hear anything at first. Then there were loud, heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. I tried to quiet my sobs, as if that was going to do anything. It was only a matter of time. Police sirens filled my ears. The neighbors must have heard it and called it in. Those footsteps coming up began rushing back down the stairs and out a door. When I was sure the coast was clear, I stepped out of the closet and fell to my knees. All of the sirens were stationary now, and it was clear the police were about to storm in. Saved. Somehow, I became the survivor of the worst Uber ride of my life. I never did catch those two maniacs, however. And since then, 4 other couples have turned up dead. We all need to stop using TikTok and Zoom right now. I'm an avid TikTok user, but I mainly just watch other people's videos. The other day, a TikTok showed up on my feed of a time-lapse of a child aging from being a baby to being 10 years old, with the caption, "Time flies." It was late, so I watched it with one eye open as I felt myself drifting off. In the morning, I woke up to my phone playing some other random video with only 2% of my battery left. I went to work later that morning, and as usual, watched some more TikToks on my break. Again, I saw the same video pop up on my feed, the time-lapse child video. I let it play again in the background as I ate my sandwich, not really paying much attention. The end of my shift came, and I made my way to my car. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a child in the road, but as I turned to look, I only saw a bus zooming past. Nothing else left on the road. When I get back into bed, I decided to Zoom call my sister and her family. She's a little bit older than I am and has a husband and 3 children. We talked for a bit about what we both have been up to. And then, after a while, one of her kids came into her room, I assume wanting something. My sister, however, just kept on talking, as if she hadn't noticed one of her kids was behind her. After a few moments, I pointed at the screen to indicate to her to look. And as she turned her head, the child was gone. The Zoom call then suddenly quit, and my screen plunged into darkness. I received another call, so I answered it. But this time it was my sister's room, but without my sister in it. Instead, it was 2 children, staring into the screen with their mouths wide open, almost as if their jaws were dislocated. Bethany. My name was hissed behind my ear. I shut my head around me but saw nothing behind me. I turned back round to see my iPad and my screen was blank. Tried calling my sister back, but she wouldn't answer. So I figured she was busy putting her kids back to bed. I browsed on Twitter, Facebook, and then finally a few TikTok videos before drifting off to sleep. I woke up around 3 a.m. to a high-pitched chipmunk song blaring out of my phone speakers. I looked down at my phone and saw the same time-lapse video of the child. The phone then turned black at the same time as my bedroom's light turned on. Staring at me was a child, eyes black, and mouth wide open with a dislocated jaw. I tried to speak, but my mouth felt numb and dry, as if I'd eaten a teaspoon of cinnamon. The child's eyes sharpened, a small white pupil forming in the middle of his coal black eyes. A blaring white pupil, right in my direction. Bethany. A voice hissed. The lights turned off. Blackness flooded the room as my phone screen turned back on. Video after video of children flashed by my eyes as my TikTok feed automatically played. Each video was a child, staring into the camera, eyes wide open, jaws dislocated. This time I heard murmuring seemingly coming from these children. At first, it was a whisper, but as each video played after the next, the murmurs became mumble, then a hiss, then a melody. The audio from the video stopped. Then, out of the silence, my phone blared into shouts of incoherent screams. The screams were no longer language known to me, just animalistic guttural cries. In desperation and horror, I threw my phone against the wall. Instead of hearing a crash, I heard a dull thud as it fell straight down onto my rug, right in front of the bed. Panic filled my body for a brief second, but then there was nothing. I woke up to the morning sun seeping through my window blinds. I got myself ready for work and made my way to my car, my hands trembling the whole journey. I spoke to one of my colleagues who I knew believed in the supernatural, spiritual stuff, and he listened to me intently. After I finished my story, he looked me dead in the eye and told me to get rid of my phone. He told me to stop using social media and to stop watching videos. Before I could ask him why, a customer interrupted us asking for directions for a product they couldn't find. I tried waiting for my colleague after work. I was eager to ask him more. As I leaned against my car door, I saw 3 children walk towards me. As I began to ask what they wanted, my mouth fell silent as my eyes met theirs. Their eyes were pure black, and their mouths dropped open, becoming wider and wider as I heard their jaws open into dislocation. I then felt a hand grip mine and pull me across the car parked to another car. Don't look back. Try not to even think about them. My colleague rasped his voice at me. I saw them. I saw those things right in front of you, in your car. I saw their eyes. I looked blankly at my colleague, unable to reply. It's okay, Bethany, you must be in shock. I know who they are, what they are. You mustn't use your phone. You mustn't watch anything else online. They will leave you alone. They will go away. My throat tightens. It's okay. You don't need to say anything. Just go home, eat, and get some rest. cover for you tomorrow. I walked away back to my car. My whole body felt stiff and lethargic. As I turned the key into the ignition, I saw the three kids again on the other side of the car. I also saw my colleague kneeling down in front of them, speaking to them. As I drove out, I drove past them, and my colleague looked up at me. His head twisted unnaturally. His eyes were black, and his mouth hung open. I sped off in my car, and I made my way home through different roads and avenues. Every time I turned my head, I saw a child on the sidewalk. Eyes black, jaw dislocated. I forced myself to keep looking ahead until I reached my house. I packed some essentials and got back in my car and drove up to my dad's house. This is where I am now, with my dad, in the middle of nowhere. There are no children here, no schools or play parks. Would have stayed off the internet. Off of my phone, I saw one. I still saw a child. There's no escaping them. I understand that now. You must all keep off these video sites. It's the only warning that I can think of that might protect you. To give you some context, I'm a 14-year-old girl, and ever since I downloaded TikTok, me and my friends would always make dancing videos for our TikTok accounts. One day, we were hanging out at the mall, and we were all doing a popular TikTok dance at the time in front of my phone that was recording. After we were done, I picked up my phone and watched the TikTok. In the video, I noticed a guy in the background. He looked to be about our age, maybe slightly older. Keep in mind, we were in a public setting, so it wasn't uncommon to get stares from people passing by. Though, this guy wasn't walking by. He was more so standing still and sort of blankly staring at us. We all noticed him, and one of my friends jokingly makes fun of him for being creepy. All in all, we thought nothing of it. I looked behind to see if he was still there, but he was gone. A couple of weeks go by, and I get a direct message from a guy named Greg on TikTok. The message said, "Hey, just noticed I was in your latest TikTok. I feel honored." Curious, I clicked on his profile and noticed that, sure enough, it was the guy who was staring at us in the background of my TikTok video. We sort of went about chatting, and I actually found him pretty funny. A couple days go past, and he asked me for my Snapchat. We text some more messages, and eventually he asked me to go out to get coffee sometime. He was pretty good looking, to be honest, so I accepted. The day comes, and we meet at Starbucks. When I see him, I immediately notice he's extremely nervous. For example, when I asked him how he was doing, he just kind of replied with one-word answers, and he kept acting like this for the entire day. I decided to break the ice by telling him he was pretty smooth over text, to which he replies his older brother helps him out with girls, and then he just kind of falls flat again. There were a lot of long silent pauses, and it was kind of starting to get a little awkward for me. I felt bad for him, but at the same time I didn't know what to say. Eventually, he excuses himself to use the restroom. That's when I start to hear faint banging coming from the men's restroom. It was like something banging on the wall, over and over. Now, the Starbucks was decently empty, so I'm 90% sure the banging came from him. The banging then stopped, and a couple minutes later, Greg comes out. I noticed his forehead was red. Was he banging his head against the wall? That's when I decide something's off about him. I tell him I need to head home and made up some dumb excuse. We told each other goodbye, and I left. As soon as I get home and get on my phone, I see a bunch of notifications coming from TikTok. So I open the app and see that he's liked all of my TikTok posts. All the likes came from about 30 minutes ago, meaning he was probably liking my pictures when he was in the restroom, given that I didn't see him on his phone when he was with me. This creeps me out. I don't know what to think. Then, I open my messages on Snapchat, and he tells me he had a really great time talking to me. This was obviously out of place for him to say, because he barely said a word. Something was definitely fishy about this whole thing, though he was texting did not match how he was in real life. Either he's just super shy in person, or his brother's giving all the hints on how to text. I decided to leave him on red. Immediately after, though, he messages me asking if I had just left him on red. I decided not to open the message so as not to escalate things, but that's when things got disturbing. A couple minutes later, I get a strange message from him saying, "Why are you making me do this?" I instantly replied to this message asking him doing what and if he was okay. From that, I didn't get any response from Greg anymore. At this point, I was a little concerned. I was thinking back to the fact that he might have been banging his head out of frustration when we were at Starbucks. I decided to call him, but no answer. I had no way of reaching him, and I didn't know where he lived, so I was stuck. I regret leaving him unread, but figured he's probably fine. I'm just doing this to get a response. The message was also ambiguous, so it was unclear whether he implied self-harm or not. Either way, there was nothing I could do to reach him, so I just decided to let it go and hopefully wait for a response the day after. The next morning, I checked Snapchat and noticed he had left me unread. I was relieved now that he was either over me leaving him unread or just making a point. A couple weeks passed and things were pretty uneventful. That was until one night. It was around 11 p.m. and I was staying up late studying in my room. I was really thirsty, so I decided to go downstairs to get some water. As I'm in the kitchen, I get my drink and get ready to head back up the stairs. That's when I hear a chair move from outside the deck. It's a noise I recognize because I hear it all the time when my parents are moving the outside deck chairs. But this time, it was really sudden and loud. I decided to go investigate, as maybe a deer or something hit one of the chairs and were making their way in my backyard. I open the sliding glass door of the deck area and look around. It's pitch black, so I can barely make out the chairs. I decided to turn on the lights, and that's when I see it. It was Greg's face hidden in the bushes. I get a mini heart attack, but in the moment I somehow froze and sort of looked to the side so that he didn't notice me and realize he was there hiding. I look around for a couple more seconds to make it seem like I didn't see anything unusual before turning the lights back off, going back inside and locking the door behind me. I somehow managed to make it look like I calmly got my drink from the kitchen counter and went back to my room. I locked my bedroom door and immediately called 911. The operator tells me that they'll send a police car on the way. I know all the doors downstairs are locked, but just in case while I'm waiting, I try to listen as carefully as I can to any noise coming from outside or downstairs. Minutes later, I could hear police sirens. They were able to find Greg. Upon talking with them, they said they found him in the backyard trying to escape by climbing the fence before getting tased for not cooperating with the cops. He was apparently placed in some sort of mental institution to get help. I'm glad Greg now receives the help he needs. But most importantly that me and my family made it out safe, as I'm convinced Greg didn't have good intentions that night. When your guts tell you to get out, listen to it. Have you ever had someone you were close with change suddenly? Almost as if they were a completely different person? That's exactly what happened to my parents when I got back from college last year from summer break. My parents were usually a bit distant, but they always made sure to keep in contact with me when I left for each semester, as we were still pretty close otherwise. When it neared the end of that semester, they didn't call or message me, as they usually did. It was weird, but nothing suspicious or out of the ordinary. I assumed that they probably just had a lot going on at work. That is, until I got home that summer. The front lawn was extremely overgrown and getting really dark and browny, which was something my father would rarely let happen. He was a gardener after all. He wouldn't be caught dead with an ugly, disgraceful lawn. On top of that, the potted flowers near the front door were all wilted and dying. Once I'd gotten inside my childhood home, it felt so off that it didn't even feel like it was my home at all. So much so that I leaned back out from the door and checked the address once more, just in case. It was the right address, but it didn't feel like it. It didn't feel as welcoming as it once did when I got home. There was no scent of lavender filling the air from Mom's candles she had lit almost 24/7. The once comforting and calm forest surroundings felt almost eerie and unwanting of my presence. My 6-year-old tabby cat hadn't welcomed me the moment I opened the door, and neither had my parents. "Mom? Dad?" I shouted. "I'm back," I shouted, hoping for some sort of reply as my voice echoed throughout the seemingly empty house. The entire kitchen and living room was very neat, as if nobody really used anything, or it was just a stage room used in a furniture store. For just a moment, a feeling deep within my gut telling me to leave began to radiate throughout my body, but I quickly shoved it away. Besides, this was the home I grew up in. It was a safe place. At least a minute or two after I'd called out to my parents, they both walked through the hallway towards the kitchen in unison. The instant I saw them, it caused me to jump out of my skin slightly, as they hadn't made a single sound as they walked over. Usually I would hear the creaks within the floorboards or the scraping of my mother's wooden chair upstairs in her office. Once they saw me with my heart racing against my chest violently, they smiled at me, but it wasn't their usual sweet and caring ones. It almost made me feel a weird, unsettling feeling, almost like if you saw a random man smiling at you from an alley in the dark in the night. It caused the gut feeling to simmer within me once more. "We've been waiting for you, dear," my mother said in a sickly, sweet voice that made me inwardly cringe. My parents never called me nicknames. They always used my full name. My mother never talked to me as if I were a child. Even when I was a child, all of it was unnerving and overloading my senses. It was too much for me to unpack and handle after a 5-hour trip from my college campus. Told them I was tired and just wanted to go rest for a bit. They hadn't even replied to my statement. From what I can recall, they simply stepped backwards to make room for me to walk past them, their stare never faltering from me, not even to blink. I felt the burning glare bore holes into my back as I made my way down the hallway and up the stairs. I felt as if they were still on me, even when I wasn't around them in my own room. I was tired enough to just toss my luggage beside my bed, crawl under the covers, and pass out, without another thought of how out of place everything felt. I woke up to complete darkness surrounding me. The only light came from the hall. As I tried my best to gain some semblance of sight within the dark, I sensed the scorching feeling of eyes burning into me. The moment I glanced towards my doorway, I almost leapt from my bed as I saw a black figure standing within my doorframe. Another dark figure caught my eye, standing in the corner of my room. Maybe it was the darkness that made it all so unsettling. Or maybe it was the fact that, deep down, I knew the people in my room weren't my parents. They just didn't have the same professional, yet caring aura that always radiated from within them. Instead, they felt hostile and dangerous. It was almost like how you would feel if you fell into the cage of a predatory zoo animal. Not sure how long I even laid there, letting the oddly heavy sounds of my parents' breathing fill the room uncomfortably. I only realized I had been holding my breath once I tried to speak. The sound that came out was simply just a gasp for air. But the moment it came from my mouth, the shadow in the corner of my eye, that stood in my room, began making its way towards me slowly. Its movements were excruciatingly slow, causing the floorboards creak to draw out longer than they should, darling. Should you not be sleeping? The shadow nearing me spoke. It was my mother's voice, but it also wasn't. It was laced with some malintent and an overbearing sense of false sweetness. "Midnight is waiting for you. We want to take you to him," said the shadow, still standing like stone in my doorway. Midnight was the name of my cat, the cat I hadn't seen once since I'd been home, which would have been one of the weirder things if it wasn't for my parents being more so. She was being a bad cat, so we had to punish her, stated my father seriously. His words caused my heart to plummet deeply into my stomach at his implication. "Get rid of her," growled my mother, a wicked grin slowly pulling the corners of her lips. "Now you'll join her," spat my father as he began to lunge for me, his mouth spread open wider than humanly possible. I could easily fit inside it in one gulp, not touching a single sharpened tooth that laid within his mouth. I quickly moved aside clumsily, knocking into the wall, hitting my head harshly. My action caused my father to fall into my bed, letting out a deep and horrid scream of rage. The sound was something that can make even the most hardened person's blood run ice cold. The way it echoed in the small room and bounced off the walls rattled my bones. It was enough to make me rush towards my mother, who now stood near the doorway, pushing her as hard as I could aside. She apparently wasn't expecting me to do such a thing, as she tumbled over into my dresser, causing everything to fall over with her. I popped my legs with vigor as I ran down the stairs, fast enough for me to almost trip down them. The moment I reached the landing of the first floor, an almost unbearable scent consumed the once tense air. The smell was almost rotten, but it was even more disgusting and indescribable than that. When I thought back to when I came home, I didn't remember smelling anything close to that. If I did, I would have easily remembered it, even if I didn't want to. I could hear both of my parents' footsteps heavily dragging against the floorboards above. They began talking in sync, their voices deep and wrapped in an utterly unsettling manner. We love you. We need you. Come here, darling. They sit together as they continue their way towards the stairs slowly. Their voices seem to fill the entire house, bellowing against every wall no matter how far away they were. I just sprinted towards the door, their footsteps beckoning sharp creaks from the staircase, in their almost mocking voices continuing relentlessly. The moment I tried the door handle, I heard their footsteps quicken down the stairs. That's not where midnight is. That's not where midnight is. She's within us now, and you will be too. They shouted darkly in unison, their pounding footsteps taunting my ears cruelly. The door was locked. They locked the door, and I didn't have a key. I never thought that old doorknob that needed a key to lock the outside and inside was stupid and odd. Until that moment, there was no way a stupidly made door was going to get me killed. As soon as the idea of just breaking through the window filled my mind, I felt my entire body being pushed with immense power across the room and over the kitchen counter. The pain that filled me was intense, so intense enough to trick me into truly believing that I broke every bone within my small body. I could hear their laughs slamming against my ringing ears as they grew closer to me. I tried as hard as I could to break out of my pain-induced doze, slowly getting up to get my bearings, just to see how hard I had to fight and run to get to my escape. Tasty thing, offered my mother. As soon as I locked eyes with her, I knew for sure she wasn't who she seemed to be. The hunger that flowed within her dark eyes were impossible to miss. The way she looked at me like a new meal as she licked her lips, smiling. Once they got close enough to me, but not close enough to grab, I crawled a bit and then pushed myself up with all the strength I had left to race for my exit. Their horrific screams of anger filled my ears once again, their feet slamming against the floor quickly now. Once I felt seething pain against my scalp, and the feeling of vicious hands pulling at my hair. I kicked the assaulter behind me. The moment my foot made contact with their stomach, a manly grunt came from them, causing them to let go of my locks. I took my well-earned chance, grabbing the stone statue of a horse that sat on the table beside the window. I smashed the statue against the thin glass, tossing it through as the pane shattered. I didn't even think about the leftover glass shards still sticking out from the window as I pushed myself through. I felt glass pierce the delicate skin against my feet and hands. But I didn't care. I just ran. I ran as hard and as fast as I could, leaving my luggage and my car behind me. I didn't dare look behind me once as the ominous, corrupted sounds of my parents shouting threats at me filled the night's air. I may have been extremely close with my family all my life. I never contacted them again. I called the police on them, mostly hoping that they would be able to get them the help they desperately needed to calm them down. I'm not sure if the news I got from the police officers was comforting, upsetting, or just disgusting. Because once they entered my parents' home, they found both of them dead in the basement. They told me that it was estimated they had been there for over a month. Once they told me the news, I knew for sure whoever those people were not my parents. It's been a year and I'm finishing my last semester of college. I still have nightmares, and sometimes I even think I see them hiding in the trees when I'm taking runs on the hiking trails near campus. If you ever have a gut feeling that something is immensely off, listen to it. It knows better than you ever could, or else you may not get the chance I did to escape the consequences. So I encountered my stalker when I was a freshman in high school. It first started off from something as extremely harmless to downright disturbing. After my first day of school, a girl named Alexa had added me on Snapchat. I thought nothing of it since I didn't know her like that. She started hitting me up, but I didn't like her in that way. One day after school, I was walking home as she randomly informed me that she added me to her private story. Okay, so I never asked her about it. I got home, and out of curiosity, I checked her private story. What I saw definitely weirded me out. Her story was a video of me walking home, particularly not too far away from our house. The caption of the video said, "Kiss me already." Did she want me to just turn around as soon as I saw her story and give her a kiss? I don't know. How did I not know she was behind me that whole time? Whatever, I got over it quickly though, since I thought she was no threat. Just a creepy harmless girl with an obsession for me. I should have blocked her. But anyways, one day I misplaced my sweater. I checked all my previous classes I had, and especially the lost and found. I eventually gave up because there were no signs of it being anywhere. I eventually bumped into Alexa one day during random lunch period at a water fountain. This was one of the most socially awkward interactions I've ever had with someone. Seeing her for the first time in person, something about her gave me this really creepy vibe. No offense. I then noticed that she was wearing my sweater, but I pretended that I didn't realize. She must have stolen it when I wasn't paying attention, obviously. She didn't say anything at first, so I felt really uncomfortable during this brief moment of silence. She then broke the ice by asking me in this emotionless stare, "Do you want to hang out later?" I excused myself from this creepy conversation by saying that I needed to use the bathroom. She gave me this annoyed look as I walked away from her. I was relieved that it was open. I stopped opening her snaps from that day on, avoiding her at all costs. Fast forward a month or two into the school year. Me and my good friend E, we were planning on throwing a party in his basement. It was just another one of those typical high school parties. So me and E made sure that no private information gets revealed about our party to no one. Really, the address. We didn't want any random unwanted guests to come over. That was a big no-no. So E gave me the approval for letting me post on my Snapchat story that there was a party going on tonight. I saw that Alexa immediately responded in the first 30 seconds, and I saw the notification that she had sent the message. I knew she was asking to come, so I never responded back knowing that she was, pretty weird. Party commenced that night, and I was having a lot of fun, and all of a sudden I heard this commotion going on in the other room. Out of curiosity, I looked in there and I saw E. He was shouting at Alexa and her two other weird friends. Alexa then noticed me and gave me this hideous stare. She walked up to me ready to fight me, and then started screaming profusely at me. She threw a tantrum about why I didn't answer her snaps and how I didn't want her to come. She was throwing a full-on fit in front of everyone. She was having a mental breakdown for another 2 minutes until she finally stormed out. After the party, me and E later figured out that she had snuck through an unlocked back door as she snuck into his bedroom and stole a Snickers. I removed that freak from my Snapchat that night. E didn't tell his parents about Alexa because he didn't want to get in trouble for throwing a party. I really didn't know how she figured out the address because I remember that me and E told everyone at the party to leave their snap maps off so nobody could see the location of the party. After that awful weekend, I was sick of Alexa and her following me everywhere I went. I realized that she was nuts. I marched up to Alexa first day at school and gave her a piece of my mind. She probably understood since I never saw her again. But it wouldn't be the last time. By that next week, she left my school, never to be heard from again. On Christmas Day, I received a text from an unknown number. She introduced herself as Alexa's aunt. Alexa's aunt said that Alexa ran away recently and to contact this number. Was this a sympathetic way for Alexa to start talking to me again? It was pretty weird knowing that her aunt had my number. I asked a group of my friends if they also got this strange text message. They all said yes. One of my friends said that apparently she does hard drugs now and that she sleeps on the streets. Another friend said there was a rumor she wanted to fight me, which I found kind of funny. I didn't believe it for some reason because she looked genuinely innocent. Boy, was I wrong. Fast forward many months later. I don't know if it was just a coincidence, but this girl definitely found me. Me and my two close female friends at the time were hanging out one Friday. They begged me to go to this popular fast food joint so we can get some snacks. It was nearby, and many kids would gather there to hang out around this time. I hesitated for it because there are usually a weird crowd there as well. We started walking and made it there in 5 minutes. We were right in front of the entrance, and two sketchy guys in dark hoods quickly approached us. They reeked of marijuana. They asked me if I wanted to buy some. I couldn't see their face in the dark. They both had low voices and were significantly taller than me. I declined their offer because I knew that they could have attempted to mug me or just jump me in the parking lot. We went inside, My two female friends made their order, and we found a seat. 2 minutes later, I saw that Alexa had just entered the restaurant with the same two guys. I got red flags immediately, realizing that one of the guys was dating Alexa, and this might be a setup. They were intently staring at us from a distance. We had to leave now, and I told one of my female friends to text her parents for a ride right now. She didn't hesitate because she also saw them too. Alexa was already creepy, but the menacing look she was giving us was nightmare fuel. Something really didn't feel right. Something bad was about to happen. In the span of 10 seconds, Alexa was at the table, picking a fight with my two friends. My friends were both scared as hell. They couldn't defend themselves, so I had to intervene and tell her to get away. She didn't put her attention toward me. She was screaming a bunch of things that a deranged person with ill intentions would say. She was right in my face, and I could see that her eyes were bloodshot red. She might have been on something. She then called the other two guys, probably to back her up. Those two guys were just as hideous as Alexa was. I've deemed that I can fully see their faces now. Her apparent boyfriend started talking to me. He told me if I ran out that he would stab me. He then showed me that he was armed with a blade. And now the tension really began to rise in the room. I was scared as hell, since I was outnumbered and they were both armed. No one was backing us up at all. Everyone was just silently staring at us. The employees were either too afraid to approach us or were oblivious to what was going on. The boyfriend was demanding me for my phone and any other items that I had on me. Meanwhile, Alexa and the other guy were making my two friends frozen in fear. I felt that I was put into a very dangerous situation. I've always been a passive person, but would never desire to get my hands dirty. But I knew how to perform jiu-jitsu. I tried to keep my cool as long as I could. I was waiting for the ride to get there so we can get the hell out of there. It felt like an eternity. These misfortunate teenagers were really underestimating me. Then Alexa's boyfriend says something disrespectful, very disrespectful, and that's when I snapped. I learned that both of them ended up breaking the boyfriend's nose. It started a massive commotion inside the restaurant. Every other kid surrounding us had recorded the brawl. Even that freak Alexa. Alexa was screaming for her boyfriend to beat me up. The employees finally broke us up and told us all to leave. In that quick moment, my girlfriends ushered me out of the building. One of their moms had come to pick us up. As we sprinted to the car, I turned around to see that Alexa and the two guys were behind us. This was the most gut-wrenching feeling I ever felt because they were armed with blades. Before I slammed the car door, the boyfriend tried to put me out. That's when I kicked him in his jaw a few times and he fell to the ground. We sped off into the night. My two friends beside me were now sobbing and uncontrollable. Meanwhile, the mom was frantically asking me what was happening. I was the only one who responded by telling her everything. The mom later said that it was mandatory that I sleep at her house. She didn't want me walking home alone in the dark that night. I just wondered why she didn't just take me home. I really just wanted to go home at this point. We made it to my friend's house, and as soon as we went to the living room, my phone started to vibrate. It was my good friend, so I picked up the phone. I put him on loudspeaker so my other friends can hear as well. On that phone call, he dropped a bomb. Earlier in the evening, Alexa and the two guys attempted to break into his house. They were banging on the front door, screaming at him to open it up. He ran and told his parents that they were intruders trying to break in. The kids booked it as soon as the parents informed him that the police were on their way. He also told me that Alexa was outside my house right after that incident. I asked him what he meant. He then sent me a disturbing video from Alexa's Snapchat story. In the video, Alexa was outside of my house with even more people than before. She then early said, "Where is he?" This wasn't over yet. I felt relieved that I didn't go back home that night. Somehow, my family didn't know that they were outside the house that whole time. The next few days were the most anxiety-filled days of my life. I started to receive threatening messages every minute from unknown contact. I knew it was them. They said that they will find me either at my house or at my school. Feeling that I was still in danger, I told my parents everything. They scheduled an appointment with 2 police officers so I could report the incident to them. I screenshotted several of the text messages sent by the several contacts. My mom would also start getting those phone calls from the same contacts. They said a bunch of crazy stuff to her that I couldn't tell you. I realized how deranged and mentally ill Alexa was after all of this. This is extremely abnormal behavior from a teenager. It was like she wanted to kill me or something. A week later of being paranoid from that incident, I was at school. We had a substitute teacher and nothing was really going on. It was the last 5 minutes of our last period and everyone was getting antsy in their seats. This class was in the basement of my school and I was sitting beside one of my friends who were there that night with me. The basement of our school was very creepy and narrow. My class was located at the very end of a long, eerie, dark hallway. My friend then asked to use the bathroom, and once she came back a minute later, she looked frightened. It was almost like she had that same face from that one night. She calmly sat down beside me and whispered in my ear, "They're here." I asked where. She responded at the end of the hallway. I checked to see if she was telling the truth, so I cracked the door open. What happened next felt like a horror. Alexa was at the end of the hallway, but she wasn't alone. My heart dropped to my stomach when I saw her. She was already looking in my direction and our eyes locked up into each other's. She was with 2 boys I fought earlier and 3 other sketchy guys. Why didn't the hallway monitor kick them out? I don't know. I quickly shut the door, feeling the same dreadful feeling that I had that night, and that I was a dead man after school. The bell rang at the consecutive moment. Class was over. As I left my class, I saw that Alexa and her goons were slowly creeping toward me. And that is when I booked it out of there out the exit. I lost him as soon as I left the school property. That night, my parents broke the news to me that Alexa and her boyfriend were just arrested, pulling off another act in a fast food joint. Employees were apparently afraid of them. Apparently, they were both common customers around that time of night. This time they were caught for good. I had been with my girlfriend for a few years when this happened, and we decided to move in together. We lived on the 2nd floor of an apartment building. I'm gonna get straight to the point. One night at around midnight, or a little bit past midnight, I could hear someone outside near a shack in our back parking lot. While sitting in my desktop computer, I can hear something. I look outside, but I didn't see anything. I turned off my light, and I heard the sound again. I looked out, then I looked down near the shack, and to my shock, I saw a man looking right at me. He was standing right next to the shack. I really wasn't afraid due to people possibly smoking back there. But it was pretty late, so I just went back to what I was doing. About 20 minutes later, I happened to look back out there. He was still there in the same spot, looking right at me. I said whatever and I went to bed. The next day around the same time, I hear a I said, this can't be happening. I looked outside, and it was the same person doing the same thing. I called one of my friends, and he thought it was funny. But the guy stood there for hours. I decided not to do anything. I told my girlfriend the next morning, and she was freaked out. So that next morning, I looked out there again, but no one was there. At least not yet. At around 1:30 a.m., I look outside, and guess who was there? That same guy. I recorded some of it, and made sure that my girlfriend was up to see this. And this is what I caught on camera. It's 2:49 a.m., and this guy's been out here for like an hour, and the cops still haven't showed up, so I just called again. So I guess we'll wait and see if they show this time. In the meantime, I'm gonna film it to keep this as a record of what's been going on. So this guy's been out here for the past 3 nights now. And it's that, like, I kind of didn't really pay that much attention to him before, because sometimes people go back there like to talk on the phone or like smoke a cigarette, I guess late at night. But this guy's just been out there standing, and I didn't really pay much mind until I noticed that he was in the same, kind of the same area every night. and he was not moving, just staring out our window. And I could see him when I'm on my computer. So, yeah, I'm gonna record this and keep a record as, I guess, video evidence, because cops never showed. After that night, he showed up a few more times, but I wasn't really worried because I bought a weapon. Till to this day, I haven't seen this guy anymore. I don't know what that was for and what his deal was, but it didn't really scare me, which is kind of weird. I don't know. I am a school resource officer in the city of Austin, Texas. Last year, my buddy and I were working graveyard shift and got a call to the campus because an alarm had been triggered. My partner and I went to the campus and went to a hallway where rooms 143 and 144 were located. After clearing the area, I told my buddy that I was going to the restroom and for him to wait for me. When I came out, my buddy signals with his hand to be quiet and listen. I noticed he had his gun drawn, so I drew mine too. I listened to the silence, and we both heard what sounded like shuffling, or something being dragged to the floor. I thought to myself, oh shoot. And I told my partner, there's someone here. We canvassed through the entire campus this time, and again, we saw nothing. Afterward, we came back to the same spot and I told my partner to head out. He agreed and stated, there's raccoons on the ceiling making the noises. He then banged in the wall, and we quickly got a reply in the far distance with another bang. My partner and I headed out in a hurry, since we knew that the campus was empty. When we headed outside, we heard screeching on top of our heads. Clear screeching, but never could determine where it came from. When we got back onto our patrol car, we asked ourselves, who would know anything or the particulars about this campus? My partner mentioned that another officer I was very familiar with. He knew the history of the campus, so we called him since he was the only one on duty anyway. When we called the third officer, all we asked was, do you know about this campus? He said, oh yeah, it's haunted. The haunted areas between rooms 143 and 144. My partner and I looked at each other in amazement. The third officer went on to say that he had a video of it. Without further ado, here's the video he provided. Keep in mind, when we received this video, everything was consistent with the noises we heard that night. And that video was uploaded by the third officer a year prior to this year. My very good friend Felicia got married in December of last year. I was one of her bridesmaids, and we had a bachelorette weekend at Daytona Beach, Florida, about a month before the wedding. There were 8 of us in total. Myself, Felicia, Andrea, Lorena, Julia, Renee, Caitlin, and Brittany. We rented a house off Airbnb that was less than a mile away from the beach. The price that we got it for was almost too good to be true. When we got there, the place wasn't what we were expecting. That's sad to say, it was a complete dump. It did have a charm to it, but there was just something off about it. For one, it had a basement, which is incredibly rare to find in Florida. Down in the basement, there were 2 rooms connected by an archway. There also appeared to be several rushed renovations done throughout the home. Something that struck me as odd was that there was a space under the staircase that was fenced off. It was very bizarre to be staring at a literal chain link fence inside of a basement in Florida. But we figured it had something to do with the recent renovations and moved along. So the first day we spent shopping around town. That evening we went out for dinner, then went bar hopping afterwards. We didn't get back until around 1 a.m. We had all drank a considerable amount that night, so we didn't stay up and hang out. We just decided to call it a night and get ready for bed. Felicia and I slept in the same bed in the first section of the basement. Through the archway is where Andrea and Lorena slept. They pushed 2 twin beds together. Everyone else slept upstairs. So about 2 hours after everyone fell asleep, I randomly woke up and turned to my side, and I see the silhouette of someone moving soundly past the bed towards the archway, where Lorena and Andrea were sleeping. The only thing that was providing any kind of light was from a streetlight outside coming through a small window, so I couldn't make out many details. But I could clearly see that whoever this person was wearing a baseball cap. Now I had made the entire bridal party caps on my cricket machine and handed them out to everyone when we first got there. So my first thought was that either Lorena or Andrea had gotten up to use the restroom. But then I thought about how strange it was that they would be wearing one of the caps I made them. Without a sound, the figure disappeared through the archway, and shortly after, I saw these brief flashes of light coming from the other room. It was almost as if someone was taking pictures. I began to internally freak out. I was thinking that someone was down there with us and was taking pictures of Andrea and Lorena while they slept. Felicia is a light sleeper, so I squeezed her hand to wake her up. As soon as her eyes opened, I whispered to her that I thought someone was in the house and that there were flashes coming from the other room. Felicia was the closest to the archway, so she got up and grabbed her phone off the dresser, which was on the far side of the basement, and peered into the other room with her cell phone. She climbed back into bed and told me that there was nobody there and that Andrea and Lorena were fast asleep. I was confused. I swear that I saw someone wearing a baseball cap walk into that room. I thought that maybe since I was in a new place, I might have been just seeing things and was overreacting. I eventually fell back asleep, and I tried to put the strange incident out of my mind and enjoy the rest of the trip. The next day we spent on the beach and even went axe throwing later on. We got back in at around 10 p.m. We popped in a movie and chilled out for the rest of that night. We all fell asleep around midnight. About an hour after I fell asleep next to Felicia in the basement, we were all woken up by a loud scream coming from the next room. We then heard Lorena shouting, "Are you guys fucking with me?" We got up and went into the room to see what was going on. We found out that Lorena had not been sleeping and was just lying in her bed listening to her headphones. She turns over and sees a man wearing jeans and a jacket, and of course, a baseball cap. He was apparently standing next to her bed, facing the wall, and was smiling. That's when she closed her eyes tight, and when she looked again, the man was gone. And that's when she started screaming. Everyone who was sleeping in the basement started to gather their things, and it was decided that we would all sleep upstairs. However, with all of us being thoroughly freaked out and wide awake and had to leave early the next day anyways, we decided just to get the hell out of there. And I drove the 2.5 hours back to my place that night. Later on, Felicia decided to look up the history of the house we stayed in. What was odd is that since its construction in the 1920s, it has changed owners several times over the years. Nobody ever lived there for more than 5 years at most. Felicia did inform the owner of the house what happened, but the owner just brushed it off, saying that they never heard of anyone having that kind of experience there before. But strangely, when we tried to look up the house to see if it was still available, the listing was completely gone from the website. If it had just been me who saw the man in the baseball cap, I might have been able to dismiss this whole thing. But Lorena saw him as well, and he seemed to vanish into thin air after he appeared. I'm convinced that we all experienced something paranormal at that house. I'm not supposed to tell anyone this. It all started this past November. I had a major job interview in Toronto in a graphic design firm. They needed me in the city for a few days, as there were 2 training sessions I had to attend along with this interview. Because I live in Niagara, about a 2-hour drive away, I decided that it would just be wise to just stay at a hotel so I wouldn't have to drive back and forth every day. About a week before the interview, I was at my boyfriend's house looking online for relatively cheap hotels that were close to the graphic design firm. He brought up that I should go on a website called Airbnb, which is an online trusted marketplace where guests can book spaces from hosts like apartments or houses. I ended up finding a woman who was going on vacation for about a week during the exact time I was supposed to be in Toronto. She was renting out an apartment for $50 a night, which I thought was very generous. I ended up giving her a call and arranged the time I would be coming over. The apartment building was very run down. The windows looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years, and the brick walls were crumbling and discolored. I took a deep breath and considered telling the woman that my interview was canceled so that I could find somewhere else to stay. But $50 a night seemed so perfect compared to hundreds of dollars a night at a hotel. I decided that I would at least check out the room before making a judgment. I knocked on the old wooden door with the number 14 painted in golds and waited a few moments before the woman swung it open and greeted me with a smile. She was a lot younger than I expected, maybe in her late 20s. Her voice sounded so tired and ragged on the phone. I thought she was at least going to be 50. Her blonde hair was tied in a messy bun that paired quite perfectly with her blue tracksuit, with a small hole in the shoulder. "You made it," she exclaims. Come in, come in." She gestured into the room, which I am relieved to say was very clean and welcoming. It was definitely one of those don't judge a book by its cover moments. I've always hated that saying, by the way, heard it too often as a kid. She gave me the quickest tour of an apartment that I had ever received, briefly pointing to the kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and hallway closet. It was a small space, but perfect for me. Her place was filled with vintage collectibles, lace, elaborate curtains, old candle holders. I was still examining my surroundings when she erupted with, "So you're all set then? I'm gonna go." I barely had any time to speak with her. She seemed to be in a huge rush. "Wait," I said, trying to catch up to her as she made her way out the door carrying the large backpack. "Is there anything I should know?" She shook her head slowly, locking eyes with me for a few moments too long. Without speaking, she laughed. I made myself comfortable for a little while, unpacking and fixing myself a quick snack in the kitchen. I had about 45 minutes before I had to leave for my interview. I'll skip past the details of the interview because they aren't even nearly as important as the occurrence that happened afterward. It was very late when I got back. The apartment building was pitch black except for a small light at the top of the staircase that flickered every few seconds. I used the light from my phone to make my way up the stairs to my apartment. 14. I wondered who else was living in the building. I hadn't seen anyone since I arrived. It was too quiet. It took me a few moments to find the light switch on the wall when I entered the room. From the doorway, I was able to see into the bedroom. The first thing I noticed was that a few of my clothes were sprawled over the floor. I quickly kicked off my shoes and approached the mess. I came to the conclusion that I must have been in a rush when I was getting ready for the interview and forgot to clean up. I was tired, so I had a quick shower and jumped into bed. The mattress wasn't very comfortable, but I was so exhausted that I drifted right into sleep. A loud shuffling somewhere in the apartment woke me up with a start. I sat up and squinted my eyes to try to see through the darkness. Just before I was able to lay back down to sleep, thinking it was one of my neighbors in their apartment, I saw a shape. At first I thought it was one of the woman's elaborate curtains playing tricks on my eyes in the dark. Then it moved, just ever so slightly. The black shape was tall and lanky. It almost resembled a man, but it was just too hard to see. I inched my arm for the light switch, my heart pounding out of my chest. Just before the light flickered on, the figure fell on all fours and crawled inhumanly out of sight. "What the fuck?" I couldn't help but whisper. With the light now on, I got up and slowly made my way around the apartment trying to find out what I just saw. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Without anything else I could do, I went back to bed. There must have been a logical explanation for what had happened. It was all in my head. In the morning, I called the woman. I must have sounded so strange when I asked her if she had anyone else that lived with her that maybe could come into the room last night, not expecting me to be there. She paused for a while and then answered with no, and insisted she was busy and had to go. I proceeded with my day, going to my first training session. When I came back that night, I felt extra cautious. I brought a knife with me to bed, placing it under my pillow. I was woken up once again about 2 a.m. This time, the figure was much closer than it was the previous night. I gasped, so filled with fright that I couldn't move or scream. The figure was so skinny. Through the shadows, I could almost make out the rib cage underneath its skin. It was naked. Its face lingered in the dark except for 2 dark circles, where his eyes must have been. I tried to scream once again, but it came out like a loud choke. Whatever this was, it reached its finger up to its mouth with the soft shh. The sound was so haunting, it sent a shiver down my neck. Don't tell. I must have been in such a shock that I passed out, because when I woke up, it was morning. All I could do was cry. I was so confused. I had never been more scared in my life. It couldn't be real. I was brought up my whole life not to believe in such things. Oh, what if it was actually a disfigured man? Or what if it was something I only heard of in nightmares? I shook my head to rid the craziness. I was probably having nightmares because of all the stress. I left for my second training session. When I came back to the apartment around 10 p.m., I couldn't help but linger outside the door. I stared at the large number 14 painted on the door, trying to find the courage to lift my key out of my pocket, to open it. I told myself that all I had to do was last one more night, and I'd be gone in the morning. I decided to sleep on the couch in the front room this time. This way I was even closer to the front door, so I could hear it opening if this thing decided to greet me again. It took me a long time to fall asleep. I watched 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and 3 a.m. go by on the clock. I must have dozed off because I woke up from a cold breeze. It was 3:47. I sat up on the couch to see that the window was open, making the curtains sway in the winds. As I got up to go close it, ready to call the police, I heard the soft shh behind me. I closed my eyes and started to cry. Shh. It got louder and louder. I slowly turned around to face this creature. It was crouched by the TV just a few feet away from me. It didn't move. It just kept its finger up to its lips. I feared that if I reached for my phone to call the cops, it would come straight for me. Please, I whispered. It was all I could manage to get out. Shh. Don't tell, it said. And the scariest thing since the first time I had seen this thing was that it started to smile. It was smiling. Although it was dark, I could see the shadowed smile. It hasn't left my mind in all the months that have passed. I remained completely still and stayed there for a few more minutes before it crawled back past the couch and onto the windowsill, looking at me one more time before jumping out. I jolted for my phone and called my boyfriend. I told him everything. I was surprised he even understood me because I was such a mess. Should I call the police? I asked frantically. The police won't believe what you were saying. It's hard for me to even comprehend. I think you need to come home. You sound sleep deprived, and I think it's making you see things. My heart sunk. Even my own boyfriend didn't believe me. It smiled at me. I whispered. I heard him sigh before saying goodnight, hanging up the phone. I curled myself into a ball onto the couch and attempted to sleep. But I didn't. How could I after that? As soon as the sun came up, I packed my things and bolted for the door. I tried calling my boyfriend 6 times to tell him I was on my way home. No answer. As I opened the door, I bumped right into the woman. She was back early. I didn't even know what to tell her when she asked how my stay was. Look, I have to go. My boyfriend isn't answering his phone and I need to get home. I pushed her aside without thinking, just wanting to get to my car. Why isn't he answering? She asked with concern in her voice. I wasn't sure why she cared. I shrugged and continued down the stair. I could see my car through the window on the bottom floor. I was so close to escaping. Did you tell? I heard her say softly from a room. You told, didn't you? Like many new parents, I first became acquainted with the various Baby Shark melodies through autoplay on YouTube. My daughter Maya was only 2 weeks old when we went through a rough bout of colic. I tried to soothe her by rocking, swaddling, and cluster feeding, but nothing worked. On one particularly difficult night, I felt like I was losing my mind. So I searched for baby songs online and just picked the first playlist that popped up. I continued to walk around the room, rocking her to the rhythms of the familiar childhood songs, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Itsy Bitsy Spider, and others. The playlist didn't stop her from crying, but it cheered me up a little and drowned out my Fussie's baby's relentless screams. Then, something miraculous happened. The slow version of Baby Shark came on. Maya stopped crying. She gazed up at the ceiling with an odd expression. Her tiny mouth twitched a little, the first hint of a smile. From that day on, my daughter loved everything Baby Shark, including alternative versions like Halloween Sharks, Santa Shark, and so on. It was around this time that my parents took a trip to South Korea, apart from soaking their bones in Busan's hot springs. They spent a lot of time walking around the Hyundai Promenade, exploring unique food stalls and street shops. At one of these shops, they found a yellow baby shark toy. They bought it off the local vendor in a heartbeat, happy to have found a souvenir for their granddaughter. To say it was love at first sight is to say nothing at all. My daughter's first laugh was at her new plushy friends. She knew who Baby Shark was before she recognized words like Mama and Dada. We sleep-trained her in one night, thanks to his soft, pillow-like texture. When she first rolled over, it was to get closer to the toy, because he'd slipped out of reach. My daughter is just over a year old now, and for every major milestone, vacation trip, and family photo session, Baby Shark has never left her side. It was super cute at first. Lots of babies have lovies, and it's a great relief to parents when there's a surefire way to stop crying with a toy or cartoon. However, I began to notice some weird things about the toy. Like, it was almost never where I thought I'd left it. At first, I didn't pay much attention, because wherever Maya started crying, I'd just be relieved that Baby Shark was within her arm's reach. When she grew out of her fussier phase, I realized he was never in a different room for my daughter. This was weird, because I'd pick her up and carry her around to different rooms for diaper changes, baths, playtime, and meal times. My husband blamed mom brain, and I rationalized it away. Like with all her milestones, we were super excited when Maya first started babbling, but my joy quickly turned to dread when I watched videos of other newborns' first babbles. They were primitives' attempts at making P, B, and M noises. My daughter sounded like she was actually talking with an intonation scale, sometimes accompanied by laughter and hand-waving. All this at just 4 months. As you may have guessed, she only ever babbled at Baby Shark. Once again, my husband thought I was being paranoid. "We have a genius baby, you're just trying to hate," he said. I kept my suspicions to myself after that. Sometimes, I check the baby monitor after bedtime and see the toy glowing like a yellow nightlight, only to blink and find everything looks normal a second later. During the day, I often felt like I was being watched, particularly if I went breaking mom, allowing too much screen time, cussing out loud, browsing social media, instead of playing with Maya or doing chores. Whenever I did anything like that, I'd feel the unusual prickle of mom guilt, and then something more sinister. I'd look up and see Baby Shark nearby, staring me down. Whenever this happened, small punishments would follow, like I'd stub my toe, or crack my phone screen, or nip myself shaving. It was never serious, and just maybe it was only a coincidence. But it didn't feel like it. I was severely creeped out. Was this some sort of weird hallucinatory strain of postpartum depression? I needed to get a grip. Stay-at-home parenting was beginning to take its toll. 2 months ago, my husband went away on a business trip to San Diego. I was so not in the mood to handle a teething baby on my own for a week. I switched on YouTube and put Maya and Baby Shark in the playpen in front of the TV so I could get some tidying done. Popping my AirPods in, I busied myself with housework while listening to a podcast. I'd check in on Maya every 5 to 10 minutes to make sure everything was okay. She was just fine, entranced by the screen, safely secured in her play area. I'll admit that I took longer to clean than was strictly necessary. I finished up by taking out the trash. Just as I was going back inside, a college friend called me. The girl we house with just posted a trashy picture on Facebook, and my friend wanted me to see it before it got deleted. I was glued to my phone for a good 20 minutes after, gossiping like a silly schoolgirl. When I finally got back into the living room, I felt that familiar pang of guilt. I didn't want to look. He was right there. Baby Shark's stitched black eyes bore into me, accusing me of being a selfish, inattentive mother. I got really angry. Enough was enough. Why was this toy making me get defensive when I'd done nothing wrong? I grabbed the stupid thing and took it upstairs to the nursery. I delighted in slamming the toy chest shut on his goofy, toothy grin. I hesitated before going back downstairs, half convinced I'd find the yellow fiend back in the same spot. But Maya's wails from the living room assured me she didn't have her friend at her side. My daughter was hysterical. I'd had enough. This was getting ridiculous. She should be able to get through an evening without a silly shark toy. Maya's attachment to the thing was just unhealthy at this point. After a giant tantrum, she finally calmed down. We had dinner, took a bath, read her favorite bedtime book. I put her to bed. Without Baby Shark, it was like the colic had come back in full swing. I went back downstairs and she screamed and screamed. I decided to let her cry it out just this once. I was furious with the Baby Shark for having so much pull, but more honestly, I was disgusted with myself and my shitty behavior that day. After a few minutes self-reflection, I understood that I was mistreating my daughter because of some utterly bizarre insecurities. I was about to go back to the nursery, reunite Maya with her toy. When I saw my worst nightmare coming to life on the baby monitor. No amount of horror movies, scary stories, or news reports can prepare you of the sight of your infant child in grave danger. The terror that coursed through my body made me realize that I would endure 1,000 more tantrums, relish in the worth teething nights, and wash up countless diaper blowouts with a smile on my face. If only I could prevent the abduction taking place in front of my eyes. It was a tall, dark figure standing at the foot of the bed, trying to grab Maya as she darted around her crib cot. Luckily, she had already learned to walk while holding on to something, so the intruder was struggling to get a hold of her. There was no time to call for help. I sprinted upstairs into Maya's nursery. Without even thinking, I grabbed the hall lamp and flung it at the stranger's head as soon as I entered the room. It only grazed him, but the distraction caused him to stumble back, buying me a split second to shove the creep further away, grab Maya, and run out. I could feel the pursuer hot at my heels until I got to the head of the stairs and tripped behind us. The last thing I heard was the man screaming as I ran down the stairs and out of the house. I jogged over to the neighbors next door with Maya crying in my arms. The police discovered a peculiar scene in our house. The man was gone, but there were signs of a bloody struggle in the hallway upstairs. I was allowed to go inside and fetch some of Maya's things, so we could stay with my parents while the police investigated the crime scene. A senior detective escorted me in, asking me elaborate questions about our day. He asked if I'd recognized the man, but I hadn't. I'd barely gotten a glimpse and he seemed entirely ordinary. No one I would think twice about if I met him on the street. Only after answering all the detective's questions did I realize that I'd forgotten to lock the front door. After taking out the trash, the intruder must have slipped inside while I was on the phone, gone upstairs to hide in one of her closets. What he planned to do from there on was made clear by the contents of the bicycle bag, which he dropped. Police officers found duct tape, a carving knife, and one of Maya's old onesies inside, the one we'd given away to charity weeks ago. A pale-faced young officer emerged from the nursery as the detective and I approached. You need to see this, sir, he said, swallowing loudly. The detective allowed me to enter the nursery, where two other policemen were laying flat on the floor, shining their lights into Maya's crib car. A crime scene photographer dropped down to take some shots of the mysterious scene. As soon as he finished, one of the officers pulled a large, mangled foot out from under the bed. The room fell into a hushed silence. Does this look like it's been shooed off? I didn't need to see anymore. I quickly gathered Maya's things and looked for Baby Shark. For once, he remained in the right place, inside the toy truck. It was a slight difference, but I paid it no mind. Nothing a little cold water and ammonia couldn't handle. Cute shark toy, the young officer commented as I walked out of the room. Love that blood spatter pattern, he laughed. Thanks. I called back as I went to rejoin my parents and Maya downstairs. Please, dear parents of YouTube, if your child happens to have this toy, don't be suspicious. Don't be afraid. Watch out for Baby Shark. And I guarantee, watch out for your little ones in the future. I was a state trooper for 25 years, and through the years I experienced it all, or at least that's what I thought at the time. This happened quite a few years back. I was on night patrol on an interstate at about 4:30 a.m. Now, I don't know if you guys know what the show Cops is, but basically it's where cameramen would follow around real cops, filming everything that goes down. Their episodes would consist of a compilation of the most interesting clips. The show's insanely popular, but unfortunately nowadays new episodes are no longer made. Back then, however, I was lucky enough to actually be featured on the show. Even though I didn't show up in many episodes, I still thought it was really cool. This night was one of the nights I had a cameraman following me around for the show. I remember his name was Joe, and was honestly a pretty down-to-earth guy. Anyway, I would usually have my car parked near a bush to hide myself from the view of oncoming speeding cars. But at this hour, I didn't really ever try to hide too much. I remember we were just driving down the interstate. Now, I didn't work in the best area. There were a decent amount of abandoned buildings visible from the road, and because of this, I adopted into my nightly routine to enter the parking lots of them, as they were hotspots for drug activity. One in particular was an abandoned gas station building. The exit for it was coming up, so I figured I might as well check it out. Joe started filming, and as we pulled up, we could both clearly see a flashlight moving around in the building. I pulled into the parking lot and put the car in park. At this point, I was almost positive some sort of drug deal was going on inside, as I could still see the flashlight moving around. But a part of me hesitated, as there were no other cars in the parking lot. I also realized if there was a drug deal going on, there would have been at least 2 flashlights visible from the outside the building. I figured either way I'd have to investigate. I went over to the cruiser's speaker, yelling out police and explaining how whoever was inside needed to exit the building immediately. Oh, right as I did this, the flashlight from inside turned off. It was now eerily silent. I decided I'd have no choice but to enter the building to get whoever was inside to leave. So I did. I got out of the cruiser and proceeded to walk towards the wide-open front door, with Joe and his camera not far behind me. As I approached, I couldn't help but notice a terrible smell. It was as if an animal died in there, and had been in there for at least a week. I peeked inside with my flashlight, once again yelling out police. Now, this gas station was small, so any sound could pretty much be heard from anywhere in the building. I stayed quiet for a second, just listening. That's when I swear I could hear what sounded like something being dragged across the floor from the other side of the building. Who's there? I got no response. I walked inside the building, and in one of the back rooms I could see what looked like a figure. I shined my flashlight in the figure's direction, but right as I did, whoever it was bolted and eventually left through a back exit. I started chasing after the guy, but as soon as I exited the same back exit, I didn't see anything. Almost the whole area was surrounded by a cornfield, so there was no way I was going to find this guy. but I figured I had to try. I ran out in some random direction, but stopped only after a few seconds, realizing it was pointless. Defeated and still confused as to why the guy ran, Joe and I went back to the gas station. But what we found left behind made it perfectly clear. There, in the back room, we found the lifeless remains of a dead body. I immediately called for backup, explaining the situation. Unfortunately, the guy responsible was never found, and the body itself couldn't be identified. For obvious reasons, what we caught on video that night was never used in the final show. My wife and I were looking for a used car on Facebook Marketplace, and actually found one we were really interested in. It was honestly a really good deal, and as soon as we saw it, we texted the seller saying we were interested. The seller seemed perfectly normal over text, and we agreed to meet in a public mall parking lot. He said he wouldn't be available until he got off work at 5, so we agreed to do the transaction at 5:30. Come 5:30, and we arrived at the mall telling the seller what car we were in, just to get a text saying he was running late. We weren't in any hurry, and we figured it'd only be like 30 minutes or so. We both agreed it'd be a good idea to go into the mall and get some food at the food court while we waited. A good 2 hours went by, both of us pretty impatient at this point. And that's when we got a text saying the guy would be at the mall soon. This was in late fall, so it was already getting dark. We were starting to worry that the mall wouldn't be as busy soon. A little bit later, the guy texted us saying we should meet him at another location, about 30 minutes away in a rougher area of the city. I looked up the address and found it was a gas station right off the interstate. What caught my eye was the hours. It wasn't one of those 24-hour gas stations, and they were actually already closed. My wife mentioned how many red flags the whole situation was giving off, but honestly, all I was thinking about was the car and how good of a deal we had found, so we ignored them. We sent over a text saying we'd be there in 30 minutes, and pulled out of the mall parking lot, making our way to the gas station. When we got there, we pulled into the parking lot, and quickly realized how dead the whole area was. There were only like a few vehicles parked. After about a minute, my wife pointed out the car, and sure enough there it was. But it looked to be in way worse condition than the original pictures on Facebook Marketplace. The car was in a pretty dark spot in the parking lot, way in the back. I started pulling up to it when I stopped. My wife looked at me confused, but I swear I could see something. I got out of the car, and that's when my suspicion was confirmed. And there was a spike strip right in the middle of the road, exactly where I would need to go to pull next to the car. At that point, I knew something wasn't right. I got back in the car, backed up, and left the way I came. Once I got back home, I reported the whole situation to the cops. Though, I never even saw anyone. The only evidence I could give was the ad itself. I never knew what came of the whole situation, but the ad was taken down a few days later. I never heard back from the cops, so if they caught anyone or not, I don't know. Either way, this situation has caused me to be a lot more cautious when using services like Facebook Marketplace. When I was 17, my mom had a job that required her to be out of town a lot. And because of this, my dad would often take me out to eat for a good part of my teen years. I remember one night we both decided to go to Pizza Hut for dinner. It was around 7 p.m., and my dad had just finished up his shift at work. Back then, my dad worked as a police officer, and at least at the time would work pretty normal hours. Anyways, we went to Pizza Hut and got our usual. On our way back home, I remember we were pretty deep into a conversation, though I don't remember what it was about. After a while, I noticed my dad wasn't really responding anymore. We were fairly close to our house, but still on main roads before we needed to turn into our neighborhood. At first, I thought he'd just lost interest, but I glanced across and noticed he was permanently looking in the rearview mirror. I asked him what was up, and he mentioned how the car behind us had been following us ever since we left the Pizza Hut parking lot. I remember glancing behind us, and sure enough, some blacked-out SUV was tailgating us. My dad mentioned how we needed to verify if this car was actually following us, He proceeded to pull into the next street and do a few turns just to get back onto the main road. I will never forget that feeling, that sinking feeling, as I watched the car sharply turn back behind ours. Now, it was around 9 p.m. on a weekday, so there weren't that many cars on the road. The car behind us then put its high beams on, and at that point my dad was completely focused. He had fully shut me out, putting all his attention into losing whoever was following us. A few minutes of this went by, when he told me to grab his phone from his pocket, call someone in his contacts, and put it on speaker. My hands were shaking at this point. I could barely press the buttons. I remember a cheerful voice answered. But before the guy could say anything else, my dad quickly summarized the situation. There was a pause, and I could hear voices speaking in the background, along with the radio beeping sounds. My dad was yelling at me to keep naming the streets we were on to the guy on the phone, as at that point my dad was still randomly turning down different streets, trying to lose the car behind us. Okay, turn it to Tesco car park. It's coming up on your left. We've got 3 response vehicles coming in from the other direction. My dad responded, and as we swung into the near-empty car park with the car behind us still in close pursuit, blue and red lights quickly surrounded us in what felt like all directions. The sound of sirens was deafening. My dad bolted out of the car and ran in some direction. After a few minutes of shouting, the driver's side door swung open. My dad got in and calmly started driving away. As we turned around in the car park, back towards the entrance, I could see the police surrounding the vehicle that had been following us, and 3 men in what looked like to be their late 20s were handcuffed leaning over the car. On our way home, my dad told me everything. He explained that he was on a drugs team that dealt with the interception of large shipments of drugs that were being transferred across the country, something I hadn't known until that point. He continued by saying people would lose a lot of money when they were caught, and some didn't like that, which sometimes resulted in specific officers being targeted. My dad would quit his job as a police officer a few years later, though he admits this was by far his most disturbing experience, especially considering I was along to witness it. This happened back in 2016, during that sort of killer clown phase. I don't know if you guys remember that, but if you were in the US during that time, there's a good chance you know what I'm talking about. Basically, in 2016, this sick trend where people would dress up as clowns and scare people became insanely popular. It had a lot of people scared, and rightfully so, as some scary stories came from the whole ordeal. But if I'm being honest, it never really bothered me, at least at the time. Now, I think it's important to note that I had just recently moved, and because of that, I started going to a new high school. Word must have got out about my Snapchat username, as I had a ton of new people from the school adding me. I had given my username to a few people, so I didn't think it was that weird. I simply added everyone back that added me. I checked, and most of them showed up on the snap map nearby to my high school, so it wasn't like I was adding back complete strangers. I remember it was Friday. I had just gone back from school, and it was 8 p.m. The reason I'd stayed so late was because the school had volleyball tryouts that same night, and back then I was really into that sort of thing. I remember when I got home, I got something to eat when my cousin texted me, asking if she could come over. I of course said yeah, since after all it was a Friday. And around an hour later, we were sitting in the living room watching Netflix. At some point, I don't remember exactly when, I jokingly told my cousin to look out the window just behind her. A little weird, I know, but we always used to mess with each other and try to scare the other person. Though, this time, when she looked over her shoulder, she didn't look back right away. She replied, saying she thought she actually saw someone. Not thinking anything of it, I just figured she was trying to scare me back, and pretty much forgot about it. That was until about an hour later, when out of nowhere my dog jumped up, ran to the front door, and started barking aggressively. My cousin and I both looked at each other. Something to be noted is my dog is insanely quiet, only barking when he feels threatened. It actually startled me, as I hadn't even heard him bark for months. I thought it might have been possible that he heard a noise from the TV or something, but the movie we were watching had ended like 30 minutes ago, and we were both just sitting in silence on our phones. Keep in mind, at this point it was around midnight. Finally, around 1 a.m., my cousin and I decided to go upstairs and start getting ready to go to sleep. I still remember this moment perfectly to this day. I was laying down on my phone checking Snapchat when I decided to open the Snap map. And that's when I saw it. According to the map, 4 other people were at my location. As in, close enough to where Snapchat groups your Bitmojis together. One of them was my cousin, but the other 3 were random Bitmojis I'd never seen before. I started thinking of all the possibilities of who would be this close to me. I went through all their profiles, but I didn't remember adding a single one of them. I knew I must have at some point without realizing it, as like I said, I had been adding a lot of new people recently. Now a little worried, I told my cousin, and we went downstairs to check and make sure all the doors were locked. Something that should be mentioned is it had been snowing for a better part of the day, and as we checked the doors, we couldn't help but notice fresh footprints signifying people had been walking around the property. There were even some in the backyard, which was gated, meaning whoever it was had to have jumped the fence. We were genuinely worried now. When I checked the Snap map, it said the 3 guys' locations were last seen an hour ago. And an hour ago was when my dog started viciously barking at the front door for no reason. The more I thought about everything, the more it seemed to connect, but there was really nothing we could do, as we already searched the whole house and locked all the doors. My cousin and I were the only ones supposed to be home this night, and we didn't want to call the police, as we didn't even know if we were in any true danger. That was when I remembered the house actually did have multiple cameras around the property, and I figured we could check those. The reason I only remembered just then was because, like I said, we had only just recently moved into the house, and our last house was pretty old, so we didn't have anything close to cameras. Anyway, we started looking through what the cameras had picked up within the last few hours. Now, when going through the footage, you could actually turn on a setting so that it would only show you the clips where motion was detected. So I selected it, and it started playing clip after clip from cameras that detected motion. Almost all of them just featured tree branches belonging in front of the camera, or normal stuff like that. But eventually, we were shown a clip of some random people we'd never seen before walk up on our property. They were all dressed head to toe in clown costumes, each carrying a baseball bat in their hands. More clips were shown of the clowns walking around. More times than once, you could see as they cupped their hands against the windows in an attempt to look inside. My cousin and I were both absolutely terrified at this point, and we instantly called the cops. Though, we didn't think it'd do much good, as all the clips were about an hour old. When they finally arrived, they asked us a few questions, and looked around the property, verifying that nobody was still lurking around. Of course, at that point they didn't find anyone, and just told us they'd patrol the neighborhood for the rest of the night. We would end up making a report on the clowns for trespassing, and gave the cops as much information as we could, including some of the footage, and even the Snapchat usernames of the profiles that were on our location. I would of course block all the accounts, but made sure to get a ton of screenshots before doing so. I still don't know who those people were, or how they were able to get my Snapchat. This whole ordeal has been very stressful and scary for me, my cousin, and the rest of our family. I'm still shaken up by the thought that they could return at any point with worse intentions. I'm 22, and recently became a highway patrol officer. I would usually patrol less busy highways, and like I said, I was just recently hired, so in terms of experience, I didn't have much. I'm not gonna lie, the first few weeks were kinda stressful, especially considering us patrol officers almost always worked in one-officer cars. Though, at this point, being about 3 months in, I was a lot more comfortable with the job. I almost always worked night hours, usually from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. At first, I thought it was annoying, but the more I did it, the more I realized why. I would give out countless tickets to the late-night reckless drivers, way more than I would in the day hours. Anyway, I was driving down the highways like I usually would. It was around 2 a.m. on a Thursday, and was honestly pretty dead. I kept the car at a steady 65 miles per hour. These highways were almost completely covered by forest, so I would always try to go at a slower pace in case a deer jumped out in front of me. I was driving for around 10 minutes, and I hadn't even seen another car. Usually, I'd have at least one car pass every 30 seconds or so, even at this time of night. As I'm rounding another bend, I noticed a vehicle with its hazard lights on, maybe a quarter mile ahead of me. It was some sort of sedan, dark colored, and was angled to where only part of it was on the shoulder, while the rest of it was jetted out onto the road. As I got closer, I noticed the driver's side door was flung wide open, meaning it was pretty much covering the whole lane. I obviously couldn't ignore this. I pulled up behind the vehicle, radioed in I'd found some vehicle with its hazards on, and got out. I walked up to the car with my flashlight. The inside light of the car was on, but nobody was inside. I instantly realized how weird the whole situation was. I mean, the keys were still in the car, with the engine still on, but nobody was around. I flashed the light of my flashlight all around, but I couldn't see anything except trees. Hello? Is anyone there? About a minute passed with no response. I was about to radio in the situation when I saw something. I looked near the tree line, and I could see a man in a mask just looking at me. Not like a face mask for COVID, or a ski mask or anything normal, but one of those masks you would see in the Purge movies. I instantly raised my flashlight in reaction, with my other hand holding onto my gun in my belt. But as I did, it revealed at least 3 or 4 other men all just looking at me. All of them were wearing masks and holding onto weapons. Some just baseball bats, but others had guns, with one even having a full-on pump-action shotgun. I pulled my gun from my belt, now aiming it at them, informing all of them to drop their weapons. But, of course, not a single one did. I was now slowly inching back towards my car, still aiming my gun in their direction. I honestly felt sick to my stomach. I was terrified, and my heart was beating out of my chest. That's when I could hear the clear sound of rustling in the tree line behind me. At that point, I'd had enough and broke all character of being a police officer. I full-on sprinted back to my cruiser and booked it out of there. As I did, I noticed at least 7 people total on each side of the road, all in the tree line with masks on. A few seconds down the road, and I requested immediate backup. But I knew I was pretty far out, and it would take at least a few minutes for anyone to arrive. Finally, after a while, a few cruisers arrived, and I proceeded to show them where it all happened. But as we showed up, there was nothing. And the car was gone, and there was no sign of anyone nearby, except the tire tracks on the side of the road they left behind. The whole situation ended up becoming a big deal, and for the next few weeks, we would have at least 2 or 3 officers within close proximity of the area. As far as I know, nothing further ever ended up happening. I still look back at the experience and feel if I responded differently, those guys would have been caught. But no, I ran like a coward, and now I have to live with that for the rest of my life. I still don't know whether those guys were a gang, cult, or something else. But either way, they're still out there, and that's all because of me. A couple years ago, when I was 15, I was really big into Snapchat. I was kind of obsessed with building my Snap score, so I would add random friends and accept random requests to do so. It was pretty weird, I know, but being that young, my Snap score was a number that mattered to me for whatever reason. Now, a lot of my friends from school and I have this group chat. I remember it was a Saturday when one of them mentioned we should go to the mall. A lot of them agreed, and I wanted to as well, but realized I didn't have a ride. So, I posted on my story if anyone was able to pick me up and take me. I was more so expecting someone I knew to respond, like my cousin or something. But I got a Snapchat back from this guy I'd never talked to before. Or at least his Bitmoji was a guy. But either way, I didn't know who it was. It said he was my friend on Snapchat, but we had never had a single conversation, or even shared any pictures back and forth before. He texted me something about how he was bored and had nothing better to do. I remember responding to him, asking if he even lived in the same state. It turns out he did, but the town he said he lived in was at least a 2-hour drive from me. I told him not to worry about it, and I didn't want him to drive 2 hours just to take me to the mall. But he quickly responded saying why not. At this point, the whole conversation felt off to me, but he insisted. I finally ended up agreeing. I told him he could come pick me up, but only if he was willing to send me a picture of himself. I was just trying to be cautious. A couple minutes later, he sent me a snap. I opened it, just to see some 30-year-old guy looking back at me. The guy had on a really dirty hat, smiling at the camera, though like half of his teeth were missing. The caption on the snap said he was on his way. I sat there for a second thinking it over in my head. How did the guy know where to pick me up? He didn't even ask for my address. That's when my heart dropped, realizing I had my Snap map on. meaning that anyone I had as a friend on the app could easily find my address. I panicked and quickly responded to the guy apologizing, saying I actually had a closer friend willing to take me. Now, obviously that wasn't true, but the fact that this guy was willing to drive 2 hours to pick someone up he had never even met before, just from their location on the Snap map alone, gave me an off vibe. Plus, the guy looked insanely creepy. Definitely not someone I'd feel comfortable being around. The guy opened the Snap a couple minutes later, but never responded. As far as I know, he never showed up. Though, I live in a cul-de-sac, and usually we wouldn't get any cars passing by our house. But I swear, for at least the next few days, there was this same black SUV that would constantly drive by. Whether that was related or not, I don't know. Though, about a month later, I was on Facebook scrolling through my feed. I passed a news story that had one of those attachments, meaning it was sourced on a different website. I almost always scroll past those things, but I couldn't help but stop for this one. There, on my Facebook feed, I could clearly see a picture of that guy from Snapchat. There was no doubt in my mind it was the same guy. The headline of the news story read that he was arrested for attempted murder. This whole experience makes me think I dodged a major bullet by trusting my gut and not accepting a ride from the guy. The whole situation shook me up for a while, and nowadays I try to be a lot smarter and only allow people I trust to see me on the Snap map. I'm a female, and when I was a sophomore in high school, I took a lot of different classes. One of them I don't think I'll ever forget. It was a history class, and the regular teacher for the class had another job on top of teaching. And because of this, we would often get a substitute teacher for the class. It was always the same guy. I would say he was at least in his mid-50s. Nothing ever struck me as odd about him, since, if I'm being honest, I rarely even ever paid attention in that class. That was until one day. I was in the middle of working on a project he assigned, but every time I looked up from my paper, he was just staring at me. Every time I would look at him, he wouldn't even break eye contact and try to play it off either. One of the times I looked up, I noticed he had his phone pointed in my direction. It looked like he was taking pictures of me. I of course was creeped out, but didn't say anything in case I was wrong. Anyway, a few weeks later, somehow, which I still don't know how to this day, the guy found my Snapchat username and added me. I knew it was him too, as he had his full name on the account. I didn't know what to do, but I still regret the decision I made. Knowing he had an influence on my grade, I ended up adding him back. A few minutes later, he sent me a snap saying, hey. He had his face in it and everything. At this point, I knew something wasn't right. I took a screenshot of the snap and left him on read. He quickly followed up with another snap, this time a black screen with a question mark as the caption. I again left him on read and forgot about the whole situation. Over the next few weeks, there were multiple occasions where I would check the Snap map just to see him not far away. And this would happen anywhere too, not just at school. I would be at the mall with my friends, for example, and see he just so happened to be at the same mall. Or even sometimes at school, when I knew for a fact he didn't work that day. Though, overall, for a solid month, nothing but those supposed coincidences took place regarding the whole situation. But of course, a few days later I would get a random message from him. I could tell it was a chat this time, and not a regular snap. I opened it, and I was absolutely horrified. He sent around 50 pictures of me in pretty much any situation. Some were of me at school, but others confirming my suspicion about him following me on the Snap map, or of me not on school campus. Obviously, I left him on read, screenshotted everything, and blocked him. I instantly told my parents, and they notified both the school and the police. It's been 2 years since the situation. I'm a senior now, and ever since he sent the pictures, I'd never seen him again. I can only assume he was fired, as we actually got another substitute teacher who was really nice. Overall, the whole situation was really disturbing. The fact that I had someone following me around and taking pictures of me just based on my location on the Snap map for a good month of my life absolutely terrifies me. I deleted Snapchat shortly after the whole experience, and like I said, I haven't seen the guy since, so I'm not entirely sure whatever ended up happening to him. I had just moved into a new apartment, And being the broke post-grad I was, I had pretty much nothing except a few boxes of stuff from my parents' house. It was nice to be done with school and have my own place, yeah, but I didn't even have any furniture. Like I said, I was completely broke. So I thought maybe I'd be able to find something at least decent on the free section of Facebook Marketplace. If you've ever searched for furniture on Facebook Marketplace, you know it's not great. Half the couches there are held up with duct tape or something along those lines. I knew I couldn't be picky, but I wanted something that could at least last me until I had enough money to buy a nice one. I'd been scrolling for well over an hour and was probably already a week into the backlogs. I scrolled back to the top and refreshed the page. The second I did, I saw an ad pop up titled, "Brand New Couch, Never Used, Free for Pickup." The post wasn't even a minute old, and I knew I had to be quick if I was going to have a chance of getting this thing. The couch was in perfect condition. I quickly typed out a response to the seller, saying I'd be willing to take it off their hands. I got a response not even 3 minutes later that read, "Yeah, the couch is all yours if you can come pick it up tonight. I'm available anytime past 9 p.m. I was slightly put off by the response. It was currently noon, and this guy wanted me to wait till 9 p.m. to pick it up, way past when the sun would have gone down. But I ignored it, thinking maybe the guy had worked till then or something. So I texted him back saying I was fine, and proceeded to wait. Come 8:30, and I sent over a text to the guy saying I was on my way. I typed in the guy's address, and quickly realized the guy lived in the middle of nowhere. Now, I live right next to the Rocky Mountains, so yeah, there aren't that many people nearby. But this guy was seriously in the middle of nowhere. My GPS said it would take 45 minutes to get there, so I quickly set off. As I drove, the housing development slowly became less and less frequent. Sure enough, there was an actually decent-looking house. But there was no other civilization for at least a few miles. Somehow I had service and was able to send out a text telling the guy I was there. Not even 10 seconds later, I got a response simply saying okay. I figured that was this guy's way of telling me he was ready. So I walked up to the front door. I knocked on the door, to which someone responded in a muffled voice. "The door's unlocked. Come on in." From the way the voice sounded, it was as if whoever said it was right on the other side of the door. I opened the door and peeked inside before entering. I quickly realized how weird the situation was. The place was pitch black, with not a single light on. Now, this was before every cell phone had a flashlight on it, so literally all I could use to help me see was the moonlight shining in from one of the windows. I yelled out a hello, to which I could hear someone responding from a door on my left that was open, and I could tell it led to a basement. And the voice said, "Come on down here. I got the couch ready to be moved." At this point I was completely on edge, and I replied saying, No, that's okay. I gotta go." I turned around, swung open the front door, and started running back to my car. I unlocked it, got in, and proceeded to relock the doors. I gave one last glance at the house before leaving. No one had chased me, though through one of the windows I could see the dark outlines of 4 different men just looking out at my car. I booked it out of there at that point and drove straight back to my apartment. When I got back, I checked my phone to see I had 3 new messages from the guy's number. The first one asked why I left, followed by one asking if I still wanted the couch. But the third one is what disturbs me most. It simply read, "You're lucky." And this is by far the most disturbing experience of my life, and has caused me to never use Facebook Marketplace or anything similar again. To this day, I'm convinced those guys in that house that night never had the intention to sell me a couch. A few weeks ago, I had to fly out to a small town I'd never been to before in order to look for a place to live at for school. I was flying alone, though before the trip I had researched all sorts of apartments in the area on Facebook Marketplace and was actually able to set up a few meetings to look at places. The first meeting was in the late afternoon in a sort of remote residential area. The landlord sounded fine over email and asked me to call him an hour before meeting him to confirm I was coming. And so I did just that. I called him an hour before, but he didn't answer. I decided to just start walking to the house and hope the landlord would show up by the time I got there. About an hour later, the guy called me. He asked me if I was still coming, to which I replied, "Yeah, I'm actually only about 5 minutes away." Though, the guy's reply caught me completely off guard. He replied, furious, saying I wasn't supposed to show up for another hour. I quickly realized he was right. Back then, I had a pretty old phone. It wouldn't automatically change times whenever you switch time zones. I forgot to change it manually and realized I was showing up an hour early. I explained the situation to the guy over the phone, but I could tell the dude was furious. Now, I get I was in the wrong, but still, getting that mad over something as small as this seemed weird to me. I explained to the guy I'd be willing to just stay outside of the house till the agreed upon time, to which he quickly replied saying no, almost pleading with me. At this point, the alarms were going off in my head, but I ignored them as I really needed a place to live. I decided I'd just go get some food at a nearby place to pass the time, until I needed to be at the house for the tour. Once the time came for the tour, I showed up to meet the guy. The guy looked to be in his 50s, and if I'm being honest, he looked disgusting. Some of his clothes were half torn, and it didn't even look like he showered for weeks. I didn't feel comfortable, and found myself just wanting to leave. Though, like I said, I really needed to find somewhere to live, and there weren't that many choices in terms of real estate at that point, so I decided to stay. As I was discussing the details about the house with the guy, I couldn't help but notice a man leave the house from the back exit. This man was young and extremely sketchy looking, even more so than the guy I was talking to. He took one look at us, ran out of the house to his car and pulled away. At this point, I was full on disturbed. I asked the guy who that was, to which he replied it was another person he was giving a tour to earlier. The guy then proceeded to ask me a lot of questions. They weren't normal questions a landlord would ask, but rather more personal questions like how old I was or what I was going to school for. The whole time staring into my eyes without blinking. I tried to give answers that were as vague as possible. Finally, we entered the house. Now, from the outside, the house actually looked decent, but upon entering, you could tell the place wasn't taken good care of. I followed the guy as we walked around the house looking at all the rooms. Every time I would ask about the condition of the house, the guy would avoid the question, simply saying it was unfinished. After we finished looking at all the rooms, the guy mentioned he wanted to show me a shed in the backyard of the house. Before I could say anything, the guy told me to follow him as he led me to the back of the house, outside away from the street, to this sort of detached shed. When we got there, he opened the door and I quickly noticed that there were stairs leading down into utter darkness. He flipped on a switch at the top of the stairs, but no light came on. Normally, the response for this would be surprise, or something like that, but he didn't say anything, and just started slowly walking down into the utter darkness, as if he expected no light to come on. The guy was now just standing there at the bottom of the stairs, in the dark, and said, "Aren't you coming down?" I said nothing, still in shock that the landlord wanted me to follow him down into this dark basement cut off from the rest of the house. For whatever reason, I glanced back at the house and saw another guy in the backyard doorway. I panicked and ran into the woods. I didn't look back, and honestly I didn't want to. I don't know if they followed me, but after about a half mile of running, I turned around to find no one. I quickly realized the situation I was in. I was in the middle of the forest at sunset, with people possibly chasing me. Though, luckily, my phone had service, and I was able to find my way back to the hotel I was staying at with no other problems. As soon as I got back, I googled the house and did some more research on it. Apparently, the house had been abandoned for 3 years. I checked the status of the original Facebook Marketplace posts I'd responded to, but of course, it was deleted. I debated whether or not to call the cops and report the situation, but decided against it, as I figured there wasn't much they could do. I can only imagine the guys I encountered that night were a group of homeless people with some unknown intentions. Whatever the case, the whole situation was extremely disturbing. I met Kyle 5 months ago at the gym. I was on the machine that trains your glutes. My phone fell out of my armband, ripped my earphones with it. Kyle ran over from the leg machine to pick it up for me, and we instantly hit it off. I remember the way he looked me up and down. He had piercing green eyes that seemed to stare right through me. When our eyes met, I felt a jolt run through my spine. I've never felt such an attraction to anyone before. The next couple of weeks we met every day at the gym. We would help each other train, we would flirt, and his confidence and stature would send shivers down my body every time. I was hooked. I was always fiercely independent. I'd left home at 18 and built up my own painting and decorating business. I hated the idea of ever being dependent on anyone for anything. I took pride in being the successful woman in a male-dominated field of work. By the start of 2020, I had 10 full-time employees, 3 apprentices, and work contracts booked that would keep the business busy until October. Kyle had such an effect on me. My pride went out the window whenever I saw him, and I felt myself becoming further drawn into him. By 2 weeks, he was spending time with me at home. We bonded perfectly. It was like we were made for each other. Kyle unofficially moved in after that, and we spent the rest of February and March in a blur of training together at the gym and spending time at home. Coronavirus hit and lockdown hit hard. All of my domestic contracts had to be suspended, leaving a few commercial business ones to divide between my employees. I furloughed half of them and decided to suspend my own salary and live off savings in a bid to keep the business running. I stayed at home with Kyle, spending a few hours a day on admin at first, but eventually I left that to my most senior employee and spent every hour of my day with Kyle. April and May flew by. Kyle and I were inseparable. We would wake up together, cook and eat together, clean together, go to sleep together. By the end of May, we were already planning to tie the knot. I was completely addicted to it. He was infatuated with me. All notion of independence and individualism faded from my minds. I was Kyle's and Kyle was mine. Conversation became few and far between. We seemed to just know what the other wanted to do. The conversation we did have usually involved gushing over each other and laying on compliments after compliment. June passed by even faster. I was screening calls for my employees and clients. I no longer cared for my own business. Kyle was my career now. We were 2 pieces of a jigsaw that fit perfectly together. You have to understand that, even by early June, I wasn't concerned in the slightest. I was perfectly happy. But something happens. Something changed everything. One evening 2 weeks ago, I was cuddling with Kyle in bed. He was playing with my hair and cooing words like beautiful and stunning into my ear. He then said to me, I never want to be apart from you. I would glue us together if I could. I let out a happy sigh and agreed with him. I said, I'd love to be stuck with you forever. We could stay snuggling for the rest of our lives. I looked up at Kyle and his piercing green eyes bore into me. I smiled and Kyle grinned. Then we both sighed in unison, and soon I was drifting off into sleep. I woke up around dawn. I couldn't move. Kyle was wrapped around me, spooning me. I tried to wriggle free just a bit to stretch my arms and legs, but I could not move. This was weird, I thought. Kyle was holding me, sure, but he wasn't grabbing me in a vice grip. I tried to move again, this time with more effort. Fuck, I had screeched. My skin had pulled and torn around my neck. I remembered my body suddenly filling with adrenaline and anxiety. Kyle? Kyle, wake up. What's going on? I'd shakenly shouted out. Kyle calmly whispered in my ear. Shh, baby. We're glued together, remember? Just like you said you wanted. My eyes widened. The adrenaline already coursing through my body increased tenfold. All the obsession and addiction I felt towards this man just fell away from my brain. I screamed, what the actual hell, Kyle? You glued us together? Again, Kyle replied in a whimsical whisper. Yeah, baby girl. Isn't it wonderful? You had some Gorilla Glue in your work things. I just made our wish come true. Time stood still for me, where I once thought the sun shined out of Kyle. Now all I could think was how much of a weirdo psychopath he was. I tried to pull free from Kyle again. Our skin pulled, and again it tore around my neck and parts of my body. Blood had started to trickle down, and I instinctively moved an arm to scratch the itch I had caused. This was a bad mistake. My arm felt like someone was pulling at my skin with 1,000 tweezers. It would not bulge. I screamed again. Fuck. I managed to turn my head just enough to look back at Kyle. His face was contorted into a forced teethy grin. His skin looked pale in the morning sunlight. His eyes were wide open. I swear, he didn't blink at all. Beautiful, he whispered from his stretched out mouth, his eyes drilling into mine. This man was insane. I screamed. I took a breath. I screamed again. My body was going to shock. My body started to shake. Again, that was such a mistake. Pain erupted all over my skin as 1,000 tweezer pinches became 100,000. This shock I needed though. The pain had set something off in my brain. I knew that I needed to get free of it. I also knew how painful it was going to be. I began with my arms. I started off slowly, trying to pull them away from him. My skin was so tightly stuck together. The pain was so immense, but I kept going. I had to get away from this ghoul of a man. I pulled harder and harder until the top layer of the skin peeled off. Then my left arm was free. I screeched out in agony. I could hear Kyle whispering behind me again. Stunning. The hairs on the back of the part of my neck that wasn't glued stood to attention. It was like I was in a nightmare, and some demon was conjured in my dreams right behind me. I pushed on and pulled my right arm free, screaming the whole time. Blood was pouring out of my arms. I jerked my head forward in determination, and the rest of my neck peeled away from Kyle's chest. I couldn't begin to fathom why Kyle wasn't crying out in pain. I was ripping away as much of his skin as I was mine. As I began to focus on my legs, I felt something wet slide down my neck. Then I heard a slurp and lips smacking together. Thirsty. Nope, I'd screamed in my head. I went for it and ripped my legs away from his in one clean motion. Pain isn't a word for what I'd felt. I don't know how much glue Kyle had used on her legs, but the skin tore apart so much that I could see patches of muscle glistening, the blood that was streaming out. I passed out. I came to as my body jolted around. Kyle had picked me up and taken me into the hallway. I shouted, "What are you doing?" Kyle replied, "Again, it's calm as anything. We need more glue." No. I turned my head again to look at him. His teethy grin seemed even wider. His eyes had turned bloodshot with the veins tingling together towards his bright green irises. His breath smelt of blood, my blood. In a desperate attempt to get away, I jerked my body weight forward. I felt a searing pain down my back as if I had just been flogged with a million whips. I fell face first onto the floor, with Kyle on top of me. As we fell, I heard a bone-crunching crack. Kyle? I felt around his body as much as my arms could maneuver, but Kyle wasn't moving. I noticed a trickle of blood stream past my face, as I realized Kyle must have hit his head on something on the way down. I used all my strength to lift us both up. As my back lifted up, I suddenly felt a lot lighter. Kyle's body had slumped off me. I was free, bleeding profusely from my back and all parts of my body, feeling more and more lightheaded. Managed to stumble across to the front door, locking. Turned around briefly to look at Kyle, his body lifeless, but that grin and wide-eyed expression still stuck on his face. I opened the front door, tumbled out into the fresh air, bloody. I ran as fast as I could for a good 10 minutes, desperately searching for anyone who could help me. I stopped to catch my breath. A setting cold morning breeze stung every millimeter of my skin, and I let out a guttural animalistic cry as I fell to the pavement. Before I passed out again, I saw a woman and a dog walk towards me. A wave of relief rushed through my body as my brain shut down. Apparently, the woman with the dog called for an ambulance, and I spent a week in a hospital in an induced medical coma to help heal my skin and shield me from the pain. I've been awake and relatively lucid for the past few days. I'm on heavy painkillers. My whole body is pretty much bandaged up, but I'm doing okay considering. I asked about Kyle when I woke up, but they didn't know who I was talking about. I've been unconscious since arriving at the hospital. They rang the police for me, and I gave them a short statement and permission to enter my house. They came back to my hospital room the next day with news that no body had been found, but they did see blood all over the floor and walls. They've made inquiries around other hospitals in the area, just in case a man of Kyle's description and injuries had been taken in, but I've not heard anything back yet. A counselor in full PPE gear dropped by earlier today to talk with me, and I shared my story with her as best as I could. She told me that what I've gone through, it sounded like obsessive love disorder, OLD, which me and Kyle had both developed. She said it sounded like Kyle had developed a form of psychosis on top of the OLD, but she couldn't say for certain. Perhaps he'd always been suffering with mental health, and I just didn't know. Or maybe his OLD had become so severe that it caused a psychotic episode. I don't know. You might think I'm crazy for sharing this story. Hell, I felt like I was crazy when it happened to me. But I swear, this is true, and I still don't have an explanation for it. Last year, a buddy of mine was getting married. When the night of his bachelor party rolled around, I was super stoked. Only problem was, I had a shift at work that night. And I told the others that I'd join them at the bar as soon as I could. It was 8 p.m. when I finally got off work. I sent a text to my pal telling him I'd be there in 20 minutes. Then I grabbed my jacket and began my walk to the drinking hall. The route between my workplace and the bar was always empty and desolate, with a forest on one side and barren fields on the other. I hated working late, since walking this lonely road always gave me the creeps. On the rare occasions a car drove past and lit up the road ahead with its headlights, I felt more comfortable, even if just for a brief moment. Now, this night was particularly dark. I was using the flashlight on my phone to light the way. The phone rumbled in my hand. It was a message from my buddy. Okay, see you soon. I was about 5 minutes into my journey when something caught my attention on the left. Far in the distance, in the open field, was a moving shape. A human shape, about 200 meters away. Whoever it was, they were alone, and they were slowly moving towards the road I was on. It seemed odd to me that someone was out there, walking through these empty fields in the dark, all by themselves. Still, I didn't pay it much mind. I continued on, keeping my eyes on the road for a few more steps. When I turned back to look at the distant figure, I was startled by how much closer they were to me now. Maybe only 100 meters away. They were still walking at the same pace a normal person would, but had gained an unnatural amount of ground in the few seconds I wasn't looking at them. It looked to be a tall, thin woman. I was more weirded out now, especially since she seemed to be walking directly at me. I walked a little bit faster, turning my gaze back towards the road. Then, after a few more seconds, I turned back to look at her again. Jesus, she was just 50 meters away now, moving like a moth attracted to the light of my phone. It didn't make sense. How was she getting so much closer every time I looked away? If she was sprinting, it still would have been inhuman, but she was just walking. Hey, I called out. Are you okay? Her only reply was this strange hum. At no point did she stop walking, heading towards me like some kind of demented zombie. I briefly turned my eyes back to the road ahead, then back to her again. She was almost at the road's edge now, in the blink of an eye, and I could hear her footsteps squelching in the wet grass, slow and consistent. I picked up my pace. Don't look at her, I thought to myself. Don't look. The sound of her footsteps had changed. She was walking on tarmac now. I turned to look again. There, just behind me now, was this woman. Her eyes were hollow and pale, her face emaciated. She was just skin and bones, her hair scraggly and light. But the worst part was her mouth. It looked like it had been sewn shut, like with a needle and thread. I wanted to ask her if I could help her with anything, but the words wouldn't come out of my mouth. She looked at me for a few moments before walking across the road and towards the woods on the other side. I sprinted off down the road, scared out of my mind. I looked behind me to see if she was following. All I could make out was her figure disappearing into the trees. I made it to the bar and rushed inside, desperate to tell my friends what I'd just seen. "Dude, good to see ya. What took you so long?" they asked me. "We were all getting worried about you." Work, like I told you," I replied, obviously distressed. "Whoa, are you okay, bud? We've been waiting for you for like 3 hours." Huh? What were they talking about? I'd sprinted half of my journey. It must have only been 10 minutes max. Confused, I checked my phone. As I did, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was 11:15 p.m. I'd left work at 8. I knew I had. The timestamp on the text message I sent my friend confirmed it. Somehow, on the short run from that girl to the bar, I'd lost 3 hours. There's no rational explanation I can come up with. Before this incident, I didn't believe in the paranormal, but I'm certain that the missing time and the girl were in some way connected. That was easily the creakiest experience of my life. It shook me to the bone. And even now, when it's dark, I still take the long way home from work, rather than walk down that lonely road by myself. So this took place way back in the 80s. I was living in Holland at the time, and one of my best friends over there was finally getting hitched. Needless to say, a crazy bachelor party had been planned. The husband-to-be was Ronnie, a real wild child. Now, Ronnie was the kind of guy who wasn't afraid to take on the world. He spoke his mind at all times, and unfortunately for the rest of us, his big mouth got us in trouble on more than one occasion. Regardless, he was a hilarious dude, a real character who was just so much fun to hang around with. Now, for the most part, the night went as planned. We must have consumed every type of alcohol in almost every bar in town. We'd been partying since 2 p.m, so by the time midnight rolled around, well, we were drunk as skunks. That's when Ronnie's big mouth got us into a whole bunch of trouble. We were all being loud and obnoxious people, like people in bachelor parties are. There was some guy standing by the bar. Now, we weren't in the nicest part of town, and this dude looked like the kind of guy you don't mess with. You could tell from the way he was dressed, from the tattoo on his neck, and the hard expression on his face. Speaking of face, this guy looked young. Younger than he actually was, that's for sure. I mean, he had a real mean case of the baby face, put it like that. Ronnie sees this guy, and he just can't help himself. He approaches him and says something stupid like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what are this kid's parents thinking, letting him have a beer? Come on, buddy, time for bed." Then he pinched the guy's cheek. "You okay, little man?" He said a few other stupid things as well, but they escaped my mind. Not cool, I admit, but he was drunk and just playing around. Babyface turns to Ronnie, gives him this big, toothy smile, and laughs at him in an obviously sarcastic way. He then finishes his beer in a couple of big gulps, throws on his coat, and walks out of the bar. Doesn't say a word. Well, that was something, we all think. Anyway, the night goes on. Things start to wind down at around 3 p.m. We all stumble out of the bar and decide to head home. As we make our way down the streets, our numbers start to dwindle. People are branching off and heading their separate ways. After a while, the only people left are myself, Ronnie, and our good pal, Eric, a scrawny but happy chap. We were getting to the end of the street we were on when a van suddenly pulls up ahead of us. The side door slides open, and guess who jumps out? Yeah, the young-looking thug from the bar. And he's not alone. He's brought 4 of his friends with him, and they're all built like tanks. They were holding baseball bats and metal poles, and they had clearly planned to ambush us. That's them, says the young thug in Dutch. When you're staring at 5 gangster-looking, weapon-wielding men with bloodlust in their eyes, you sober up real quick. Ronnie, Eric, and I turn and bolt. We could hear the footsteps and shouting of the thugs behind us, getting louder and louder as they gained on us. I was certain that if they got their hands on us, we were dead men. We got to a fork at the end of the street. We were just running on instinct at this point, and Derek and I turned left while Ronnie turned right. I looked back to call for Ronnie, only to see 3 of the men still chasing behind me and Eric. They were like rabid dogs. There was no way the 2 of us could handle them. They were laughing as they chased us, yelling about how we were already dead and how we'd messed with the wrong guy. We made it to a turn that led onto a residential street. I leap over the first fence I see and land in somebody's backyard. Eric quickly follows. I grabbed a shovel that was lying on the grass, and the 2 of us crouched up close against the fence, trying our best to stay hidden. I held the shovel tight and whispered to Eric, "The first one that comes over, I'm gonna hit him." I really meant it. I was gonna hit him on the head and probably kill the guy, but I meant what I said. I knew they'd probably kill us otherwise. Eric and I looked up at the house of the garden we were hiding in. The light in the bedroom window switched on. A middle-aged woman poked her head out. We must have woken her up. She looked down at the 2 of us, crouching in her yard, holding her shovel. Then she looked to the men chasing us. They had just turned the corner and were standing on the other side of the fence we were hiding behind. "Where the hell did they go?" we heard one say. We were terrified that they'd hear our heavy breaths. All I could do was grip the shovel tightly and prepare to strike. I prayed that I wouldn't miss. I prayed that I could fight the 2 that were left standing. The lady in the window called out to them, "Hey!" My heart sank. She was about to throw us to the dogs. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead. I closed my eyes. "I saw them. They went that way," said the lady, and pointed down one of the side roads. The thugs spotted and ran off into the night. This angel realized what was going on, and she had just saved our skin. She watched as we hopped over the fence and made a break for it in the opposite direction. We both gave her a nod before we sprinted off. I had never been so grateful. And this was before the days of cell phones, and we had no idea where Ronnie was. We went around to his house, but he wasn't there. We, of course, feared the worst. Thankfully, by the time the morning rolled around, he had re-emerged. He'd managed to slip away from the thugs, laid low for a while, and made it home without them following him. To this day, I'd say that's the closest I've come to dying. In hindsight, those guys must have been watching us from afar for a few hours, waiting for most of our group to leave so they could strike. They wanted Ronnie, but were more than happy to attack Eric and I, just for being friends with him. Luckily, we all escaped, and Ronnie got to marry his blushing bride and have a few kids. He never did learn to keep his mouth shut, though. crazy Dutch bugger. Like the green? Do you like the blue? You like the raspberry and shot too? Flavor is what you crave. You really want to savor. Then don't get into pickle. This happened to me last time I babysat. It was for a single parent, 5 blocks down from me. We'll call his daughter Melody, and I'm Natalie. I'm changing all the names in this for a reason, including my own. Don't ask why. Just beware. You could hear the jingle probably a mile away. Melody sprang up from the couch and started to sing aloud. Do you like them green? Do you like them blue? Do you like them raspberry and chocolate too? The flavor is what you crave, and you really want to savor. Then don't get into pickle and buy from Mr. Sickle. It was repetitively bursting every eardrum on the street as it belted out its loud, obnoxious noise from a clown nose atop a mishmash truck. I can only describe it that way because of how peculiar it looked. It had a painted rainbow of different colors, ranging from brown to turquoise, to dry cherry and blend yellow. Whoever had done the job simply wanted to slap on something and be done with it. There were only the nose to be seen on the roof. The rest of the clown apparatus torn away, some more likely from a recent storm, and the windows and the front of the van were completely darkened to keep anyone from peering inside. As it stopped on the block, the brakes made a lurching noise, like a cat was being put to death, and the entire thing shook back and forth. As soon as it stopped, so did the music. And then the side window, where the salesman was supposed to be, slowly rolled down to reveal an equally black drive-by window with a few words scrawled hastily in bright orange marker. Mr. Sickles makes any flavor, and he always picks your favorite. I couldn't tell what it was in between the 2 exclamation marks, but it looked like an asterisk and fine print, like something you might see after a copyright. Below that was a list of prices. $1 for a cone, $3 for a triple sundae. But some didn't make much sense. $73? Was the ice cream made of golds or something? Nat, can we get some? Can we? Melody asked. Her parents hadn't said anything about no ice cream. I did have a little change in my pocket. I debated it for a second or two, and then I knew my options were either to hear her whine about not getting a frozen treat, or to let her eat some ice cream and have her parents grabbing me later. If you have ever babysat a hyper 5-year-old, you know what choice I made. I stood there, only a few feet away from the window, waiting for whoever ran the jalopy to peer out. It seemed like it took a rather long time. Then finally a voice barked from the window. "You want your flavor, girl?" it asked. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, to be honest. "I'll take strawberry for the kid," I said, taking $1 out of my pocket. "That's not how it works. We choose the flavor. You eat it," the voice responded. "That's stupid," I admitted. I also felt a little unsure about myself. Why was I arguing with the vendor? How did I even know what this thing sold was even edible at all? "She likes strawberry," I told the voice. "You shouldn't buy for anyone except yourself." "Whatever," I sneered. "Lay your money on the counter and turn away," it responded. I shrugged, complying with the instructions, as I turned to the kid who was impatiently waiting by, hopping up and down. "Melody, you need to settle down," I told her. "I want chocolate too." She insisted. "Your dad will kill me." "Sorry," I said. I waited another minute, wondering when the ice cream man would tell me to turn around. Then the voice said, "Enjoy your treat." I sighed and looked at the lopsided sundae that was now sitting in place of my loose change, and offered it to the kid. "Let's go sit on the porch and eat it so we don't make a mess," I suggested. She complied, happy at last. As we sat down, I noticed that the truck was still sitting there. Was it watching us? It gave me a weird vibe. Melody got very quiet, and her eyes got very big, She took the first bite, and then she screamed bloody murder. "What the hell?" I asked, looking down at her cone. In the middle of it, there looked like some kind of raw meat, maybe even flesh, and maggots writhing about trying to break free. She dropped the cone instantly and ran screaming inside. With a huff, I stood up and marched down to the van, slamming on the side of it. "That was a mean trick you just played. What is wrong with you? Why are you messing with little kids?" I demanded. "Well, I give what they deserve. That's our specialty," the voice answered. "Yeah, well, I deserve to get my dollar back since you swindled us," I demanded. "Sorry. No refunds. Listen, bud. Either you give me my dollar back, or I'm calling the cops and reporting you for being a peeping Tom," I said. There was a pause, and I huffed in triumph. A moment later, the voice said, "Maybe you should ask Melody if she wants a refund." I opened my mouth to make another smart remark when I felt a tug at my pant leg, and I turned to see Melody standing there, covered in ice cream. To my surprise, she had returned and ate the entire thing, maggots and all. "I want another one. I want another one, Nat." I got down on one knee and wiped her mouth, confused by her behavior. "Honey, that ice cream was nasty," I chided her. "No, it wasn't. I liked it, and I want more." "I need more," Melody shrieked. I heard a giggle from the ice cream truck and turned to confront the vendor. "So that's your scam? You make little kids get addicted to your nasty shit?" I muttered. "Maybe you should try a flavor for yourself and find out," it said. "Maybe I should make you taste a knuckle sandwich," I said, clenching my fists together. "Natalie, I really need another ice cream," Melody squealed. "I told you no," I demanded as I slammed my fist on the van again. "I've had enough of this. Show yourself." The window slid open. I was speechless. It had been days now, and I don't really know if I can describe Mr. Sickles properly. He had a face like you might find on a Jack-in-the-Box, except his eyes were hollow, and his mouth was split down the middle. He wore the traditional vendor uniform and hat, but perhaps most striking of all were his hands. They were literally shaped to be blades like sickles, but made of flesh and bone. I found my knees wobbling as the strange humanoid extended its accordion-like neck toward me, its expressionless face never wavering as it started up the jingle again. This time, stretched its neck to place its head on the top of the ice cream truck. Then, it detached from the folding neck, turning 360 degrees, and encouraging other children to come out and try a frozen treat. Come, get your frozen ice cream from Mr. Sickle. Sundae, lollipop, strawberry, and chocolates. Slowly, it sank its neck back into its dark hole, a headless ghost now that was chuckling madly as I felt Melody tug at my pants urgently. I hate to admit it, but in those few nightmarish moments, I had forgotten about her entirely. I turned to her, and this time, I was the one screaming. Her little body was starting to melt the same way any frozen treat might in the midday sun. Her facial expression was a mixture of anguish and pain as she begged for one more lick of ice cream. Then her lips slipped from her face into the street below. A moment later, she was just a puddle of goo, misshapen and unrecognizable. And Mr. Sickles was back on his route again. That unforgettable jingle enticing others to come be a part of his madness. Do you like the green? Do you like the blue? Do you like the raspberry and chocolate too? Flavor is what you crave, and you really want to savor. And don't get into pickle and buy from Mr. Sickle. Who the hell invented Baby Shark? Well, if you're like me, a parent dealing with lockdown that has way too much time on their hands and has heard this song one too many times, you probably did some internet sleuthing. On the surface level, it looked like a Korean company called Ping Fong created the song about 5 years ago, and it became a viral phenomenon. Merchandising soon followed. My daughter has been begging for one of their big stuffed plushies. Because I'm a single dad, trying my hardest to keep my kids entertained while stuck at home. Of course I complied with that. It was easy enough to grab one from Amazon and get one shipped straight to my door. My daughter was immediately in love with it, taking it everywhere around the house, and constantly squeezing it to hear the song play. I will admit there were quite a few long sighs involved, as she did this about a dozen times. Any parent will tell you. Yes, despite how catchy the tune is, it does get annoying after the 300th time, but I'm a patient guy. I figured that the stuffed animal would eventually lose battery, so I did my best to ignore it and go about my day as usual. When night came, I told her that Sharky would need to rest too, and surprisingly, she didn't put up a fight. I tugged at the tail to turn up the song, just like the instructions said, but nothing happened. It just kept doing the jingle. My daughter giggled and said, "Sharky must not want to go to sleep." Well, even if that's true, you have a Zoom teacher meeting tomorrow, so I will have to make you go to sleep anyway, I told her. She pouted, and I hummed the shark song, changing the lyrics to say, "Go to sleep, do 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 do. Go to sleep, do 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 do. Go to sleep." She giggled and lay down, asking me what I planned to do with her stuffed shark. "I'll check the manual and get him to rest. Don't want to wear out the batteries," I promised as she turned over for bed. I took the stuffed animal to my bedroom and tried a few more times to squeeze the trigger to make the noise stop. But again, nothing seemed to work. My next troubleshooting solution was to see what people said to do online. It's probably just cheaply made, I told myself as I read a slew of bad reviews. Maybe I can just get her a new one. Or take the soundbox out, I mumbled as I rubbed my sleepy eyes. In the background, I could hear the terrible song play over and over. Baby shark do 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 do, baby shark do 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 do, baby shark. Throw away do 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 do, throw away do 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 do, throw away. I turned towards the shark, thinking I had misheard and picked it up. Run away do 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 do, run away do 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 do, run away. The singing toy now said. I rolled my eyes and tossed it down, returning to my Google search. I wish I could get away from you. I tossed it as I shut everything down for the night. No escape do 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 do, no escape do 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 do, no escape. That made me stop and actually really pay attention to the next lyrics. You'll be sorry do 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 do, you'll be sorry do 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 do, you'll be sorry. The shark said, "What the hell?" I said to myself, thinking I had lost my mind. I decided to go ahead and take the soundbox out, thinking that this had to be my sleepy brain playing tricks with me. I went to the kitchen to get a knife as it kept singing, this time with normal lyrics, but much louder. "Well, sorry, Sharky, but some of us actually do need sleep," I said as I found a good knife and was about to cut out the stuffing. I heard my daughter make a squeal. "Daddy, what are you doing?" she said, snatching the stuffed animal from me. Sweetie, I just need to turn it off for the night. Don't worry, I wouldn't hurt Sharky. We can get Grandma to sew him up. He's broken," I told her. "He is lying do-do-do-do-do-do. He is lying do-do-do-do-do-do. He is lying." The stuffed animal said. She glared at me and squeezed her toy harder. "You were trying to hurt her. You're a monster." "Sweetie, just give me the toy," I said with a sigh. "Run away do-do-do-do-do-do. Run away do-do-do-do-do-do. Run away." The toy instructed her, and to my surprise, she listened, running to her room and slamming the door closed. I sighed in frustration, following after her. "Open this door right now," I told her. "No, you will take Sharky away," she screams. "I promise I won't," I said, rolling my eyes and wishing I had never taught her how to lock doors. I didn't want to call a landlord to come this late and unlock a door over a stupid stuffed toy. "Please, sweetie, it's late. Sharky needs sleep. So do you. Just open the door and I promise I won't hurt him. We'll even let him sleep with you. Okay?" I said with a long sigh. Judge me for my parental skills later, but I just wanted this ridiculous little tantrum to be over and get to bed. "Promise?" she squeaked. "Yes." I pinky swear. She slowly unlatched the door, holding her toy so tight that I thought she would make the stuffing burst out. I showed her my hands were empty and I wasn't gonna hurt the annoying toy, and then obliged her by tucking her into bed. Go to sleep, do-do-do-do-do. Go to sleep, do-do-do-do-do. Go to sleep, I said, kissing her forehead. The toy seemed to mimic me, citing the final lyric. Sleep at last, do-do-do-do-do. Sleep at last, do-do-do-do-do. Sleep at last. Then I went to bed too, hoping that the constant lyrics wouldn't keep her awake and resolving to handle the broken toy in the morning. I honestly didn't get much sleep myself though, too worried about how strange the toy was. Surely I wasn't the only one that had bizarre things said by their toy. I wanted to be rational, and so my sleep-deprived mind told me to go online and see if any other people also cited any weird things happening around their toy. In new forums I found encouraged users to check out an apparently hidden website that told about secret messages in the lyrics. It sounded like a goofy conspiracy theory, like the one way back in the day about playing music backwards to hear the devil. Still, your brain convinces you to believe things at night, and I looked into it. The results were terrifying. Children self-harming because the toy told them to, setting fire to their homes, being brainwashed to be slaves to the toy, to make their parents go to jail. It was enough to make me jump out of bed and decide that I needed to just get rid of the stuffed animal immediately. I could hear my daughter snoozing softly as I peeked into her room, surprised to find that the toy had finally gone silent. Maybe the batteries had just died at last. Still, I didn't want to risk it and decided to just go ahead and do the deed of tossing it out. I snuck over to her bedside and reached over to take the toy. Instinctively, I squeezed its tail, but no lyrics played. Sighing in relief, I started to leave the room and went to the kitchen to grab the knife. I had to be sure that this was just some glitch in the system. As I opened the toy, I reached inside to take off the electronics. Except it wasn't a sound box at all. It was a camera. My whole body froze as I realized that whoever owned this had been using it to spy on my daughter. I immediately tossed it into the garbage and then threw up. I took Sharky back to bed and tried to get some sleep, certain that the worst was over now that I discovered what the sicko was doing. I messaged the manufacturer to warn them of how the toy was being exploited. And somehow, despite all of the weirdness of the night, and the occasional garbled jingle from the garbage, I got sleep. I was mostly worried about how to explain this to my daughter. She was already in love with the toy so much. But that worry never manifested, because when I got to her room to wake her up, I was mortified to see that my daughter was gone. In her place was a stuffed shark doll and a note. I checked the house first. The front door was wide open. Someone had broken in and kidnapped her. The same someone I was sure that had been monitoring us via the toy. Then, as my head spun, I tried not to panic. I read the note. "Squeeze me," it said. My hand shook as I reached for the tail of the toy. Run away, do-do-do-do-do-do. Run away, do-do-do-do-do-do. Run away. Won't come back, do-do-do-do-do-do. Won't come back, do-do-do-do-do-do. Won't come back. And one final jingle to taunt me as I tried to not sob. I'm at last, do-do-do-do-do. I'm at last. Last summer was a bit crazier than usual, wasn't it? COVID ruined a lot of plans for me and my friends. We were going to take a trip, go to Six Flags, go camping, go anywhere really, but the lockdown took it all away. It almost felt like summer was going to be a bummer. You know what I'm saying? I truthfully thought most of those days were going to be spent stuck inside a house, like a prisoner. I was searching for any excuse to get out, and boy, did I find it. When I heard the most peculiar little jingle, I knew immediately what it was. Even though I hadn't heard a similar tune in ages. An ice cream truck. Call me a child if you want, but I dropped my game controller immediately. Ran to go buy some ice cream treats. The truck looked old. If it was my grandfather talking, he would say it resembled a jalopy, in need of all kinds of repairs, especially the audio system. It was just obnoxious noise now that I was close enough to hear anything. The tires looked half inflated, one headlight was busted, and most of the artwork was fading. It almost made me want to go back inside. The appeal of eating something so frosty from such a filthy stall made me second-guess myself. But I reconsidered when I saw a flock of other kids starting to chase the junky vehicle to the next side corner. The truck came to a screeching halt, and then the back windows where the vendor would peek his head out opened up. The man inside looked friendly enough. He wore the traditional striped uniform that looked a bit faded and torn. But he also had a smile on his face, and that seemed to be enough to sell his treats. Already a dozen kids were flocking around, trying to make requests, as I heard him tell them to settle down. "You all get a chance to buy. Just form a line, please," he insisted. I can't help but admire his business gusto. Here we were, the middle of a freaking pandemic, and this 60-year-old grandpa was selling ice cream. It was admirable, but also a bit nutty, and I think if it wasn't for his warm nature, this gimmick wouldn't have worked. As the children happily got out the change, I decided to get to the back of the line, feeling a bit strange that I was the only adult in sight to ask for a treat. Was I being awkward coming out here for ice cream? I didn't want any of the neighbors to get the wrong idea. But besides the street corner where the vendor was parked, most of the area seemed deserted. I was being paranoid for no reason anyway. It was just ice cream. Gradually, the line got shorter, and it was my turn to get whatever I wanted. But then I noticed the vendor was getting ready to close up shop. "Hey, hold on. I have money," I shouted as I pulled out a $5 bill. He gave me a look and then shrugged and said, "Sorry, it's closing time anyway. Besides which, I don't have any product left." I looked over his shoulder to see a whole other freezer full of treats and huffed in frustration. "I just waited 20 minutes in the blistering heat. Just give me a popsicle for all I care," I lamented. "No can do, sonny. Sorry," he said with a smile as he closed his stall. I couldn't believe my bad luck as I looked at all the happy kids eating their ice cream around me. Then he cranked up his truck again and drove away, leaving me a little bitter and confused. But whatever. If I really want ice cream, I'll just break the lockdown and go to the store. Not like anyone follows the mandates anyways. Those were the thoughts running through my tired brain as I got back inside and wasted the rest of my evening on Amazon and Netflix. Somewhere during the evening, I fell asleep right on my couch. I lost track of time. When I woke up, though, I heard that same jingle again. It was so loud I was sure it was going to wake up the whole neighborhood. Then I looked outside and realized it was pitch black. Checking my watch, I realized it was after midnight. What the hell was the ice cream truck doing here so late? It went to that same street corner and turned off the engine, sitting there ominously in the shadows, as the stars above highlighted its contorted features. Then the music started playing again. This time it didn't sound so cheerful. It was dreary, frightful, but also hypnotic sounding, psychedelic. It puzzled me as to what was happening for a moment. And then across the neighborhood I saw lights begin to come on. All of their customers were suddenly waking up. Slowly, kids climbed out of windows, pushed through doors. Some were even in pajamas. As I watched, it looked like they were sleepwalking, moving slowly in one single group to the truck. Were they being mind-controlled? Saying it now, that sounds insane, I know. But this is exactly what it looked like as the group of young children circled the truck. And the music got louder and louder. Then, at last, it all got silent. The crowd stood there, mesmerized by the flashing lights, now appeared around the truck. It looked like they were flickering at such a speed to cause a seizure of some kind. Suddenly, all the children began to do just that, collapsing on the ground and shaking violently. Instinctively, I ran out of my front door to check. I didn't even put any shoes on. My main concern was these kids. They kept shaking and foaming at the mouth as I got closer, and I saw the vendor standing at his truck window, smiling almost maniacally at all of them. "Hey, you sick... leave them alone," I shouted to him. and got his attention. His drooping eyes glared at me as he turned off the music. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked in a pleasant voice. But I wasn't about to be fooled by his schemes now. "I'm calling the police on you, boy. You're gonna regret ever hurting these kids," I told him. "Hurt them? I wouldn't dream of it," he said with a snicker. Then he pressed another lever in his truck, and a new melody played. This one sounded like it was being done in reverse, with waltz notes and confusing strings amid the orchestra. The children all stood up, rigid like statues, and it was then I saw their eyes. Dazed, addicted, and listening to the thrall of this insane ice cream. "You drugged them," I realized. "Children, take the nice man back to his house," the vendor told his brainwashed slaves. They swarmed me like ants. I didn't even have a chance to move. Plus, I was worried if I did try to fight back, I might hurt one of the children. They grabbed and bit at my arms and legs as they shoved me towards my house. All the while, other children dispersed in the neighborhood to do whatever evil their master was asking of them. It didn't take long for the children to reach my house, lock me in my closet, then begin to rifle through all of my belongings. I was trapped there for at least 6 hours, listening as the kids gleefully smashed apart my house. The strange music kept playing louder and louder. And then at last, fire engine sirens were in the background. That seemed to be the cue to leave. The ice cream truck jingle came to an end. The noise was replaced by the roar of a fire. My house was about to become an inferno. I shouted and banged on the door, hoping against all odds I would be found. It took them another 5 minutes to save me. Once I was out of my smoke-filled house, I saw that they had their hands full. The entire neighborhood was suffering from the hypnotized arsons. Everything that I had was stolen. One person screamed. Others shared similar stories. I too was struggling to breathe as I realized my valuables were likely taken too. The ice cream man had come into our lives, wiped us clean. It was disorienting and frightening to think of. And honestly, it made me never trust a vendor again. Even when the fireman offered me a cool popsicle, I felt a sick churn in my stomach. "The heat isn't so bad," I told him as I waved it away. "I don't think I'll be asking for ice cream anytime soon."